Welcome, and thank you for choosing to be here in this quiet space tonight with Midnight Documentaries. Whatever the day has asked of you, whatever small or heavy weights it placed upon your shoulders, they can be set down now. The world outside may continue to turn, with its rhythms of traffic, voices, and endless demands. But here, within this listening, there is no rush, only calm. Only the slow unfolding of thought and wonder, paced gently enough to follow you into rest. If you'd like these quiet journeys to continue, consider subscribing. No pressure, only if it feels right. Take a slow breath in and let it ease out. Like a tide rolling back across a soft shore. Notice the way your body, even without command, already knows how to seek comfort. Already knows how to drift toward stillness. You do not need to chase calm. It will come on its own, the way night follows day, the way Earth itself circles the sun without ever straining. Let your thoughts lengthen. Let their edges soften. And know that you are safe to drift. In this gentle state, we begin to wonder, what is this ground beneath us? What is this planet that holds us in its wide embrace? Most often, we think of Earth as matter and motion, rock, water, atmosphere, and light, a set of resources, a stage on which life performs. Yet perhaps there is another way to imagine it. A question that has echoed quietly in myths and philosophies, and now finds new expression in the language of science. Could Earth itself be alive? Could it, in some slow and hidden manner, be conscious? At first, the thought seems strange. We are taught to separate the living from the non-living, to distinguish stone from flesh, air from breath, soil from blood. Yet boundaries blur when we look closer. The rocks beneath our feet, compressed over eons, carry the story of seas long vanished and forests turned to stone. The air that fills our lungs is the exhalation of countless leaves, each one shaped by the turning of the sun. In this way, what seems inert is already entwined with life, already whispering its own role in a larger body. Perhaps, when seen from far enough away, the entire planet could appear as a kind of organism, breathing, pulsing, regulating itself across the ages. And yet, we must pause, for alive is a word heavy with meaning. Life, in its simplest sense, grows, changes, sustains itself. A tree turns sunlight into sugar. A coral reef builds its skeleton from calcium, rising slowly toward the surface. A bird shapes twigs into shelter for its young. Could Earth itself, vast and ancient, share in these qualities? Or is it only a stage for smaller lives to enact their dramas? Maybe it is alive. Maybe it is not. Maybe it is something else entirely. Something that does not fit neatly into our words. To step into this wondering is to step into a space where science and story begin to overlap. Ancient peoples spoke of Earth as mother, as goddess, as the one who breathes life into all things. Modern researchers speak of feedback loops, systems, and resilience. In both, there is a recognition of connection, of balance maintained across scales too vast for an individual to hold in a single glance. Earth does not exist as scattered fragments, but as a whole, a pattern woven together by rivers and roots, clouds and currents. It is a whole that somehow endures across 4.5 billion years, surviving the burn of impacts, the chill of ice, the rise and fall of entire continents. Think of time as an editor, carefully selecting which traces remain, which chapters of Earth's diary survive to be read. The oceans dissolve records, the wind erases cliffs, mountains rise and then wear away to nothing. What remains are fragments, a shell pressed into stone, a ripple frozen in ancient sand, the thin, bright lines of atmosphere carrying memories of sunlight. We read these fragments as clues, as if they were words left behind. But perhaps they are more than that. Perhaps they are the scattered notes of a long conversation, one that Earth has been holding with itself for ages upon ages. Imagine, if only for a moment, that the ground beneath you has thoughts of its own. Not thoughts like ours, rushing in quick succession, but thoughts stretched over centuries, millennia, eons. A glacier could be a memory slowly moving downhill. A river could be a sentence flowing, pausing, reshaping its course. A forest could be a dream, revisited season after season, leaf by leaf. If such a thing were possible, what might it mean to live upon a planet that not only sustains us, but also, in its own hidden way, contemplates? Of course, we cannot claim this is so. We can only wonder, hedge, imagine. Perhaps Earth is only matter in motion, without awareness. Perhaps consciousness is limited to the fragile, fleeting beings that walk upon its surface. Perhaps even we do not truly understand what we mean when we speak of mind. And yet, the question remains, like a faint melody in the background. Could there be awareness larger than ours? Slower, quieter, but no less real? You may find, as you listen, that your own thoughts wander, to forests you have walked in, to the sound of waves you once heard, to the scent of soil after rain. That is perfectly welcome. In fact, it is part of the journey. Let memory drift in and out, the way clouds drift across the face of the moon. If you fall asleep, you will not miss the answer, for the answer is not fixed. It is the asking itself, the gentle circling of the question, that matters here. As we continue, we will explore the patterns that keep Earth stable, the cycles that resemble breath, the networks that resemble circulation. We will touch on the myths that saw the planet as divine, and on the sciences that now frame it as a self-regulating system. We will ask whether consciousness could scale upward, whether awareness could exist without self, whether fragility itself might be a form of life. All of this lies ahead, unfolding at the pace of night. For now, it is enough simply to rest in the wondering. Earth turns beneath you, as it always has, as it always will. Night covers the land, stars keep their quiet watch, and still the question hums softly at the edges of thought. Could this world, our world, be alive in ways we have yet to understand? Now, let us drift further into this wondering. When we first step into the question, when we first let it settle across the surface of thought, it feels both simple and impossible at once. Could Earth itself be alive? The words feel familiar, even childlike, as if they belong to the realm of storybooks, or to the whispers of ancient people gazing upward at the sky. And yet, when we pause, when we sit with the question without rushing toward an answer, it deepens. It becomes something larger, something that stretches across science, philosophy, and imagination all at once. For most of us, Earth has always been just a planet, a ball of rock warmed by a star, wrapped in water and air, ornamented by green patches where life manages to flourish. It is the backdrop, the stage, the foundation on which all living things perform their brief scenes before vanishing into memory. We think of mountains as stone, oceans as salt water, skies as shifting weather. The ground beneath us feels solid, unthinking, passive. In this view, Earth is not alive. It is merely the setting for life. But when we turn the question, even slightly, patterns begin to appear. Earth is not simply a silent host, but a place where countless systems weave together, each dependent on the other. Rain falls, rivers carve valleys, soil carries nutrients, roots stretch down to drink, leaves stretch up to light, and the air shifts in response. Remove one part, and the whole begins to change. What looks like a passive stage reveals itself as an intricate dance, a system of patterns regulating themselves, Not through command, but through balance. Scientists have sometimes described this as homeostasis, a word drawn from biology, meaning the ability of a system to keep itself steady. Your body does it every moment, balancing heat and heartbeat, regulating oxygen and blood sugar, holding equilibrium so you can survive. Could Earth, at its immense scale, be doing something similar? Could the entire planet be maintaining conditions suitable for life, adjusting itself slowly, subtly, with a rhythm almost too vast for us to see? This thought is at the heart of what has been called the Gaia Hypothesis, first suggested by James Lovelock and later expanded with Lynn Margulis. They proposed, carefully but boldly, that life does not merely exist on Earth. It participates in shaping the conditions of Earth itself. Forests breathe oxygen into the air. Ocean plankton influence clouds and climate. Microbes and minerals exchange elements that change the chemistry of the seas. Like the feedback loops of a body, the biosphere and the planet respond to one another, keeping balance. Lovelock gave this system a name borrowed from myth, Gaia, after the Greek goddess who was the personification of Earth. The choice of that name was not accidental. It was meant to remind us that the idea of a living Earth was not new, but ancient. For thousands of years, cultures across the world have spoken of the ground as mother, the sky as father, the rivers as bloodlines, the forests as spirits. These were not scientific hypotheses, but they carried a recognition of interconnection. They expressed, in the language of story, the intuition that the world is not a machine of separate parts, but a whole, alive with relationships. Modern science, cautious and precise, hesitates to use words like alive or conscious. It prefers patterns, processes, cycles, yet the images begin to overlap. When we hear that forests act as lungs, that rivers circulate like veins, that microbial communities stabilize climates the way immune systems stabilize health, the metaphors sound familiar. The mythic language of an Earth alive finds an echo in the scientific language of Earth as system. One speaks in story, the other in data, yet both point toward something larger than fragments, a sense of wholeness. Of course, to ask whether Earth is alive is not to abandon rigor, nor to drift into ungrounded fantasy. It is to notice how narrow our usual definitions of life might be. Life, as defined by biology, is something that grows, metabolizes, reproduces. Does Earth do these things? Not in the ordinary way. Planets do not divide like cells or give birth to smaller planets. Yet perhaps the definition itself is limited. Perhaps life is not a simple checklist, but a spectrum of ways systems sustain themselves across time. In that spectrum, Earth may not look alive in the way a fox or a fern does, but perhaps it is alive in a slower, vaster sense. And then we must invert the thought. Perhaps Earth is not alive at all, and all our metaphors are just projections of human imagination. Perhaps the planet is simply a container of resources, governed by physics and chemistry alone, indifferent to the lives it hosts. From this view, the patterns we see are not evidence of mind or self-regulation, but coincidences born of natural law. The climate is not a breath, but the result of equations. The rivers are not veins, but channels carved by gravity. To call Earth alive would then be to romanticize, to overlay myth where only mechanics exist. So we are left between two frames, Earth as just a planet, and Earth as something more. Earth as stage or Earth as system, Earth as inert or Earth as alive. Science and myth circle one another like two dancers, sometimes close, sometimes apart. Each offers a perspective, each leaves room for wonder. Perhaps the most important part of this wondering is not in reaching an answer, but in holding the question gently. To ask is to notice. To notice is to slow down, to see the world not as background, but as participant. When we pause to imagine Earth as alive, even if only metaphorically, our relationship to it shifts. It becomes not just the ground we walk upon, but a presence we live within. As we drift further, we will continue to balance these perspectives, the mythic and the scientific, the poetic and the precise. We will explore how feedback loops keep Earth steady, how myths gave voice to intuitions long before equations confirmed them, how fragility and resilience both emerge when we look at our planet in this way. For now, let the question itself linger, not as a puzzle demanding solution, but as a gentle horizon toward which we walk. Could Earth itself, in some vast and hidden manner, be alive? Now, let us step further into this wondering and listen for the voices of those who long ago imagined Earth as more than stone. Across the long sweep of human memory, before satellites orbited the skies or equations mapped the chemistry of air and sea, people looked at the ground beneath their feet and the heavens above their heads and felt a presence. To them, Earth was not an object, not merely soil and stone, but something far more intimate, a living being, a parent, a mind vast and hidden. To listen to those voices now, across centuries and continents, is to hear echoes of an old intuition, that the world itself is alive, and that every creature dwells within its embrace. In the high mountains of the Andes, where the air is thin and the horizon stretches endlessly, the people once and still speak of Pachamama. She is not just the soil that grows the crops, or the water that quenches thirst. She is mother, provider, guardian. Offerings of corn, coca leaves, and chicha are given to her in gratitude, not out of fear, but out of recognition that the earth sustains life with a generosity that deserves reverence. To them, the planet is not passive matter. It is an active relationship, one where human beings are children dependent upon a vast and ancient parent. Across the seas, in the myths of Greece, the earth bore a different name, Gaia. She was the first mother, rising from chaos, giving birth to sky, to sea, to mountains, and to gods. Gaia was not background. She was origin. When poets invoked her, they were not only describing soil and stone, but a presence from which all else emerged. To imagine Earth as Gaia was to imagine life itself as the expression of a single, living foundation, an unbroken line from ground to God to human. Further north, in the traditions of the Norse, Earth was Jord, a giantess and the mother of Thor. She was kin to the gods, woven into the fabric of myth as a being of both power and intimacy. In many Native American traditions, too, the earth was mother, the sky father, their union giving birth to all creatures that walk, fly, or swim. The soil was seen not as dead matter but as sacred body, and the rivers not as accidents of erosion but as living veins carrying nourishment. In these stories, the earth was rarely silent. She breathed through the winds, spoke through the rustle of trees, offered guidance through the patterns of stars. The people who lived with these myths did not separate themselves from Earth in the way modern thought often does. They saw themselves as children in a vast household, dependent on their parents' continuing care, owing respect, balance, and humility in return. These voices, though diverse, share a common thread, an intuition that Earth is not object, but organism, not stage, but story. The metaphors are varied: mother, goddess, giantess, ancestor. But the feeling is similar. The earth is alive in some way, alive in the sense of holding, nourishing, remembering. To live upon her is to dwell within a larger being. to be part of a whole that precedes and outlasts individual lives. We might, from a modern perspective, be tempted to set these myths aside, to file them under the category of poetry, imagination, or pre-scientific explanation. But there is something worth noticing in them, something worth carrying forward. These stories reveal not only how people explained their world, but how they felt about it, how they experienced the earth in their daily lives. When a field yielded crops, it was not only biology at work, it was generosity. When rain fell, it was blessing. When rivers carved valleys, it was the motion of a living body. To live in that worldview was to live in constant dialogue with Earth itself. And perhaps this is what myths do best. They take the ineffable, the vastness of the world, the ungraspable scale of time, the mysteries of growth and decay, and wrap them in images the human heart can hold. To say Earth is a goddess or mother is not a literal claim in the way science defines terms. It is a way of acknowledging relationship, of expressing gratitude, of reminding ourselves that we are not outside the system but within it. Even now, when we speak scientifically, our language is still threaded with metaphors that echo these ancient voices. We say forests are lungs, rivers are veins, the atmosphere is a blanket, the planet's climate is in balance. These are not far from the old myths. They are simply framed in a different idiom, one that leans on systems and feedback rather than gods and spirits. The intuition remains. Earth behaves as if it were a body, as if it were a being, as if it were, in some sense, alive. Listening to these voices is not to accept them uncritically, nor to confuse metaphor with mechanism. It is to acknowledge that for much of human history, the default way of seeing Earth was not as an inert rock, but as a companion. The myths remind us of something easy to forget, that to survive here is to be in relationship with a world that sustains us. The difference between myth and science is not one of truth versus falsehood, but of language. One speaks in stories, the other in models. Both attempt to describe the same mystery. Why this world continues to hold life, when so much else in the cosmos lies silent. There is, too, a gentleness in pausing with these ancient voices, rather than rushing past them. They are part of our inheritance as a species, fragments of the way humans have always tried to make sense of their place in the universe. In their rhythms we can hear not only imagination, but reverence. And reverence is a tone worth carrying, even as we turn to scientific frameworks. It softens the heart. It slows the pace. It reminds us that questions of life and consciousness are not only intellectual puzzles, but lived experiences. So we linger here, among myths of Mother Earth, Goddess Gaia, Pachamama of the mountains, and the voices of countless traditions that spoke of soil and stone as living presence. They do not give us final answers. They do not measure or prove, but they open the door to wonder. They remind us that humans have long felt Earth as more than background, as more than resource. They prepare us for the next step, where science takes up the question, seeking in data and systems what myth once carried in story. Now, let us turn gently from these ancient voices toward the quieter, measured language of science, and ask how Earth might be understood, not only as myth, but as system. When scientists speak of life, they tend to use careful, deliberate definitions. They ask what separates the living from the inert. What makes a cell more than a stone? A forest more than a desert of dust? In biology, these definitions are drawn like soft outlines rather than sharp borders, but most often they circle around three great markers: metabolism, homeostasis, and reproduction. To be alive, a thing must take in energy and transform it, must regulate its own inner balance, and must in some way make more of itself. These are the thresholds of life as science describes it. Imagine the first of these, metabolism, the act of exchanging matter and energy. Every living thing, from the smallest bacterium to the tallest tree, must eat in some form. Cells burn sugar. Plants drink sunlight. Whales draw nourishment from oceans filled with krill. Life is always in conversation with its environment, taking in, transforming, releasing. If we look at Earth with this lens, we might begin to notice something familiar. Rivers run like veins, carrying nutrients from mountains to seas. Volcanoes rise and exhale, bringing elements from deep within up to the surface. Forests breathe carbon dioxide in and oxygen out, while oceans absorb the gases of the sky and feed them back in shifting rhythms. It is not metabolism in the way of a single cell, but it is the circulation of matter and energy on a planetary scale. The second marker, homeostasis, is the delicate act of balance. Living beings maintain an inner world different from the chaos outside. Humans sweat to cool, shiver to warm, adjust their blood's chemistry to survive in thin air. A plant tilts its leaves toward light, thickens its bark against drought. To be alive, in this sense, is to resist collapse by constant adjustment. When we widen the frame to Earth itself, we find something similar. The planet has maintained liquid oceans for billions of years, despite a sun that has grown hotter over time. Ice sheets grow and retreat, but never entirely vanish. Rainforests, deserts, tundra, and coral reefs all weave together in a fabric that stretches, pulls, and yet holds. The atmosphere, fragile as a soap bubble when seen from space, regulates temperature within a narrow band that allows life to continue. Some scientists have even called this the most remarkable fact of all, that Earth has kept itself habitable, against the odds, across deep time. And then there is the third marker, reproduction. To be alive, a thing must make more of itself. Cells divide, seeds fall and sprout, generations replace one another. Here, Earth stumbles against the definition, for it does not split in two and give rise to daughter planets. It does not scatter its seeds among the stars, at least not in any way we can measure or point to. In this sense, Earth seems to fail the test. It carries life, but it does not itself replicate, unless, perhaps, we are willing to loosen the frame. For in the future, if life born of Earth one day reaches other worlds, carrying its oceans in miniature, its forests in seed form, its breath in stored air, might that not be a kind of reproduction? Earth sending parts of itself outward, planting not genetic but planetary seeds? It is speculation, not science, yet the thought hovers at the edge of possibility. Definitions of life are useful, but they are also imperfect. Viruses, for instance, trouble the categories. They do not metabolize on their own, but they reproduce by hijacking cells. Fire consumes fuel and spreads, yet we do not call it alive. Crystals grow and branch, but their repetition feels mechanical rather than vital. Life slips between boundaries, and any definition we make feels provisional, like a sketch rather than a photograph. Perhaps the same applies when we ask about Earth. To some eyes, the planet is only rock and water, bound by physics, ruled by chemistry. To others, the web of feedbacks, cycles, and balances looks eerily like the behavior of a body, a being with its own steady pulse. Think of the atmosphere as a great lung. It expands and contracts with seasons, with forests inhaling and exhaling in cycles of growth and decay. Think of rivers as veins, carrying nourishment from one part of the body to another, spreading minerals, feeding deltas, enriching seas. Think of tectonic plates as bones shifting, strong yet flexible, knitting together fractures, breaking and healing across eons. The metaphors are not perfect, but they gesture toward a pattern. Earth organizes itself in ways that echo the living. And yet, we must acknowledge the limits. Earth does not, in any conventional sense, possess a nervous system. It does not speak, except in storms and quakes, in winds and waves. It does not plan, does not decide. Consciousness, if it exists at all, is hidden from our instruments. To say Earth is alive, then, is not to claim it meets every criterion without exception, but to notice that the boundaries between life and non-life blur when scale grows vast. What science calls alive may be too narrow when applied only to cells, too wide when stretched to planets. Perhaps the question is not whether Earth fits neatly into the box labeled life, but whether our definitions can grow alongside our wonder. If life is, at its heart, a dance of energy and balance, then Earth may already be part of that choreography. And if reproduction is the sticking point, perhaps we should remember that life itself is not static. It evolves, it adapts. Its definitions, too, may need to evolve. In the end, science offers us both clarity and humility. It gives us criteria, markers, guidelines. But it also reminds us that definitions are human tools, and that the world is always larger than the tools we fashion. To call Earth alive or not alive is less a verdict than a lens, shaping what we see, shaping how we treat the world beneath our feet. Perhaps, then, the most fruitful path is not to demand an answer, but to sit with the ambiguity, to allow the metaphors to breathe alongside the measurements, to let the image of rivers as veins and skies as breath rest beside the charts of carbon cycles and thermodynamics. In that space between science and poetry, between definition and wonder, a question remains alive. Might Earth itself be alive in a way we have not yet fully defined? Now, having paused to explore what science calls alive, let us drift forward into the deeper question of whether Earth's own patterns of self-regulation might hint at something even more profound. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's something else entirely. That is where we find ourselves, circling back to the question with which this night began. Could Earth be alive, even conscious? We have wandered through myths and stories, through scientific definitions and metaphors of veins and lungs, and still the answer remains softly unresolved. Each path gives us a glimpse, but none a conclusion. And perhaps that is the point, that life itself is not a wall we step across, but a spectrum that stretches in both directions, from the tiniest flickers of order in molecules to the vast orchestration of a planet holding oceans and air in balance. Think of the smallest beginnings, a spark of chemistry in a warm pool, a cluster of molecules arranging themselves into patterns that persist longer than chance alone would allow. Was that life, or was it only the edge of life, a rehearsal before the first true song? And now, when we look at Earth as a whole, with its swirling atmosphere, its deep mantle-breathing heat, its forests responding to sunlight in quiet unison, do we see another threshold? Not a single cell, not a body in the way we know, but something larger, harder to frame. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's something else. This rhythm is worth holding because it reflects our own searching minds. Questions like these are not asked only to gain answers, but to remind us of how deeply we wish to belong. To call Earth alive is also to place ourselves within it, as part of its body, as children of its breath. To call Earth lifeless is to draw a boundary, to set ourselves apart. And perhaps the deepest reason we ask is because we want to know whether we are woven into something greater, whether the ground beneath us is only stage or also storyteller. Life, after all, resists simple categories. Fire dances and grows, but lacks memory. Crystals grow with symmetry, but lack desire. Viruses carry blueprints, but cannot build alone. Each sits on the border, half in and half out of our definitions. Perhaps Earth, too, sits at such a border, not easily captured by criteria, but not easily dismissed either. It is vast, slow, subtle. Its movements are measured in centuries, its changes across millions of years. We may be too small to notice its pulse, too brief to hear its voice. And yet, just because we cannot measure something does not mean it does not exist. To step back is to see the spectrum more clearly. On one end, chemistry, minerals, tides, stone. On the other, consciousness, awareness, thought. Between them lies the long unfolding. Bacteria, forests, oceans teeming with whales that sing across great distances, minds that ask questions in the dark. Earth is not a single point on this line, but perhaps the canvas on which the line itself is drawn. And so, when we ask if Earth is alive, maybe we are also asking if life can be scaled. If there are forms of being that operate beyond the scale of bodies, beyond the scope of blood and skin, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's something else. Repetition becomes a comfort here, a kind of mantra to soothe the need for certainty. Because this is not only about science, it is also about wonder. To live with an unanswered question is to live with possibility, and possibility itself can be a gentle companion. In a world that so often demands conclusions, the act of not knowing can feel like an open field where the mind can wander freely, safely, slowly. Why do we ask at all? Perhaps because the question reflects ourselves. To ask if Earth is alive is also to ask what we mean when we say we are alive. Are we defined by cells and nerves alone, or by the ways we connect to each other, to forests, to oceans, to skies? If Earth is a body, then each of us is a cell within it. If Earth is a stage, then each of us is a fleeting actor upon it. Both images shape how we live, how we treat the soil, the rivers, the thin air we breathe. Questions are not idle. They are lenses, and the way we choose to look changes what we see. So here, at the close of our first wandering, we rest in the spectrum. Earth may not fit neatly into the box called life, and yet it resists the box called lifeless as well. It hovers in between, a presence too vast to name, too near to ignore. Perhaps the wisest path is not to declare, but to listen. To allow our definitions to bend, our metaphors to expand, our curiosity to stretch. Now, let us step deeper into Earth's hidden workings, into the feedbacks and cycles that hold its balance, into the patterns that look less like mechanism and more like intention. The question will remain with us, quietly alive, as we continue forward. Now, let us drift further into the idea that Earth itself can be seen not as a collection of separate parts, but as a single unfolding system. From space, the planet appears whole, one luminous sphere turning silently against the backdrop of night. Yet within that sphere are many layers, each alive with its own motions, each bound to the others in patterns of exchange. The atmosphere moves above. The lithosphere lies beneath. The hydrosphere flows in between. And the biosphere, thin and fragile, threads through them all. Scientists call this Earth system science, a way of studying not only the parts but also the relationships, the endless cycles of give and take. Imagine it less as a machine with gears and bolts, and more as an orchestra. Each section has its own voice, the percussion of tectonic plates rumbling beneath, the strings of rivers pulling across the land, the woodwinds of the atmosphere breathing in waves of weather. Alone, each is striking. Together, they become something greater, something woven, something continuous. Consider the atmosphere, that thin band of gases hugging the planet like a translucent cloak. It seems insubstantial, barely more than a haze. Yet it carries within it the power to hold temperatures steady, to distribute rains and winds, to nurture the cycles that sustain every form of life. Without it, Earth would be either frozen barren or scorched bare. It is at once shield and breath, both fragile and enduring. Below lies the lithosphere, the crust and mantle, the restless stone beneath our feet. Far from static, it moves in slow surges, plates shifting, mountains rising, valleys splitting open. These movements shape continents, guide ocean currents, and even influence the chemistry of the air above. Stone, though it seems unyielding, is part of the living rhythm. Its changes measured not in hours or days, but in millions of years. Flowing between these layers is the hydrosphere, the waters of the world, cycling in endless patterns. Oceans cradle warmth and reflect sunlight. Rivers carve their paths and ferry nutrients. Clouds gather, drift, and dissolve. Each droplet is part of a circulation that began long before us and will continue long after. Water, the solvent of life, is the thread stitching Earth's layers into one, and woven throughout, as both participant and beneficiary, is the biosphere, the delicate lace of life itself. From bacteria deep within the soil to forests stretching across continents, life does more than adapt. It reshapes. Plants alter the air they breathe. Reefs build the seas they inhabit. Even tiny microbes influence the stability of oceans. Life is not merely a guest here. It is a co-creator of the system, as vital as the winds or the rains. When seen together, these spheres are not isolated chapters, but one story written in many voices. An orchestra, not a machine. A conversation, not a set of separate acts. The Earth, in this view, has maintained its stability not by being rigid, but by adjusting, by absorbing change and weaving it into new forms of balance. Across billions of years, the sun has grown hotter, yet Earth's oceans remain liquid. Asteroids have struck, and still the cycles continue. Ice has spread, thawed, and spread again, but the system has endured. Perhaps it is like a melody carried through time. Notes shift, rhythms vary, but the song remains. Each part may falter, but the whole adjusts. A feedback here, a correction there, and the balance continues. If you think of Earth as a body, this is its homeostasis. If you think of it as music, this is its harmony. And if you think of it as something more mysterious, perhaps it is simply Earth being itself, sustaining itself without intention, yet with remarkable persistence. You might picture it as a weaving loom, with the threads of water, stone, air, and life crossing over one another again and again. Each thread strengthens the others. Each keeps the fabric from unraveling. And though the pattern shifts, storms coming, glaciers melting, forests rising and falling, the loom continues its quiet work. It is easy in daily life to forget this wholeness. We feel the rain, but not the ocean currents that guided it. We see the mountains, but not the tectonic pressures that lifted them. We breathe the air, but rarely notice the balance of gases maintained by forests, oceans, and microorganisms. Yet when placed together, the picture grows wide, and the question of Earth's vitality becomes more than poetic metaphor. It begins to sound like science itself. The beauty of Earth system science is that it reveals not only interactions, but resilience. Over 4.5 billion years, Earth has faced upheavals, volcanic winters, asteroid strikes, ice ages, and each time the system has recovered, not by returning to an identical state, but by finding a new equilibrium. This resilience might be compared to the way an organism heals, not perfectly, but sufficiently to continue. A scar forms, a pattern shifts, Yet life goes on. Soon, we will step into the details of how this self-regulation works, into the feedback loops and cycles that seem almost purposeful in their persistence. But for now, it is enough to hold the image of Earth as more than a sum of parts. To imagine the atmosphere not just as air, but as breath. To picture the lithosphere not just as rock, but as structure. To see the hydrosphere not just as water, but as circulation. To regard the biosphere not just as passengers, but as collaborators. If you are drifting, let the thought linger gently. Earth as orchestra. Earth as loom. Earth as body. The metaphors are many, but all point toward the same possibility, that the planet itself is a system alive with interdependence, resilient by design, enduring through harmony. From here, the story opens into the mechanisms that make this balance possible. The invisible threads that tie storms to forests, volcanoes to oceans, and even the smallest leaf to the climate of the world. It is there, in the language of feedbacks and loops, that we will glimpse the next layer of Earth's quiet persistence. Carrying that thought onward, we arrive at a gentle yet provocative idea that has stirred both admiration and debate: the Gaia Hypothesis. It was in the 1970s that the scientist James Lovelock, with the microbiologist Lynn Margulies beside him, suggested that Earth might best be understood not as a stage for life, but as a participant in it. Their thought was simple at first glance, but profound in implication. Life and the environment are not separate. They shape one another, sustain one another, and evolve together in patterns too intricate to reduce to chance alone. Imagine, for a moment, a forest. The trees do not merely exist within the climate, they help create it. By pulling carbon dioxide from the air and releasing oxygen, they alter the very atmosphere on which they depend. Their roots stabilize soil, slowing erosion, guiding the path of rivers. Their leaves provide shade, changing temperatures beneath. In this way, the forest and the environment are not two entities in isolation. They are threads of one fabric, co-weaving, co-creating. Lovelock and Margulies extended this simple observation to the entire planet. What if Earth's biosphere, life in all its forms, acts as more than just an occupant? What if, through countless interactions, life itself regulates the conditions that make life possible? This was Gaia, not a goddess, not a mystical claim, but a hypothesis. A model that says Earth behaves, in some ways, like a single self-regulating organism. To explain the logic, Lovelock once turned to a parable he called Daisy World. It was not a literal world, but a model, a thought experiment designed to make the idea visible. Imagine a planet warmed by a sun. On its surface grow only daisies, but of two kinds: dark-colored daisies that absorb heat, and light-colored daisies that reflect it. When the sun is faint, the dark daisies thrive, warming the planet by drawing in light. As temperatures rise, the lighter daisies take over, cooling the planet by reflecting heat back into space. In this way, without intention, the population of daisies regulates the planet's climate. No single daisy makes a choice, yet together they create a balance that allows them all to endure. This story, simple as it is, mirrors the way life on Earth interacts with its environment. Algae in oceans influence cloud formation by releasing compounds into the air. Forests regulate rainfall by exhaling moisture. Microbes deep in the soil recycle nutrients, shaping the fertility of entire ecosystems. None of these processes are designed in the human sense of design. They arise naturally, from the collective actions of life responding to its conditions and in turn reshaping those conditions. It is important to pause here, to let the boundaries of the idea remain soft. Lovelock did not claim that Earth is literally alive in the sense of having thoughts or intentions. He offered Gaia as a hypothesis, a lens through which to see the complex interplay of systems. It is not mysticism, but metaphor made rigorous. The planet behaves as if it were alive, not because it secretly harbors a hidden mind, but because the feedbacks between life and environment mimic the behavior of a living body maintaining homeostasis. Skeptics, of course, raised questions. Wasn't Gaia too much like poetry? Too far from testable science? How do we measure intention when there is none? And yet, even those who resisted the metaphor could not deny the evidence. Earth has maintained habitability for billions of years through cycles of upheaval, extinction, and renewal. Something in the feedbacks of ocean, atmosphere, and life has preserved the conditions for continuity. Think of Gaia less as a doctrine and more as a gentle suggestion. It says, look at Earth as a whole. Notice how climate is not only shaped by geology, but also by forests, microbes, and even the smallest organisms in the sea. Notice how stability arises not from isolation, but from interaction. The hypothesis does not demand belief. It invites perspective. You, listening now, might imagine the daisy planet again. As the sun brightens, the flowers shift, dark giving way to light, each unaware of its role in a planetary dance. On Earth, the patterns are more complex, but the principle is the same. Life alters its world, and in doing so, sustains itself. It is a quiet reciprocity, a choreography written over eons. Soon, we will step deeper into how these feedbacks actually work, into the cycles of carbon and oxygen, the flows of water and heat that connect every living thing to the whole. But for now, the Gaia hypothesis offers us something to hold. A picture of Earth not as passive, but as participatory. A system where life and environment are partners in endurance. If you are drifting, let the thought rest with you like a calm refrain. Maybe Earth behaves like a body, maybe not, maybe something else. The hypothesis remains a question, an invitation, not an answer. And in that openness lies its beauty. From here, let us wander into the feedback loops themselves, the subtle, hidden threads by which forests call the rain, by which oceans breathe with the sky, by which the smallest forms of life help steady the largest. From here, the story drifts upward, toward the invisible envelope that surrounds us all, the thin, fragile veil of gases that clings to Earth and makes life possible. The atmosphere is often described in scientific terms as a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and trace elements. But in the quiet light of reflection, it can also be seen as something more, like the lungs of the planet, drawing in and releasing in cycles that have gone on for billions of years. To breathe as a human being is to take part in this greater rhythm, to join a pulse that spans forest, ocean, soil, and sky. Consider oxygen, the gas that fills your lungs with every slow inhale. It is not a permanent feature of Earth's air. In fact, for the first half of Earth's history, there was little oxygen at all. The atmosphere was thick with carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases inhospitable to most modern life. It was only when small organisms, cyanobacteria, began to harness sunlight in photosynthesis that oxygen began to accumulate. They split water molecules, released oxygen as a byproduct, and in time reshaped the planet's chemistry. What began as a microscopic trickle became a flood, known now as the Great Oxidation Event. And it transformed Earth into a world where animals could one day breathe, move, and dream. Oxygen, however, is only half the story. It is balanced by carbon dioxide, a gas exhaled by animals, by microbes, and even by the slow breathing of volcanoes. The carbon cycle is a grand inhalation and exhalation at planetary scale. Plants and phytoplankton pull carbon dioxide from the air, weaving it into sugars and tissues. When those tissues decay or are consumed, carbon returns, released again into the atmosphere. Sometimes it is stored away in stone, locked as limestone or fossil fuel. Sometimes it lingers in the sky, trapping heat and shaping climate. In this way, the atmosphere is not static. It is dynamic, like the rise and fall of a chest, the subtle rhythm of breathing that never quite stops. To picture this, imagine Earth as a body lying beneath the sun. The forests are its lungs, stretching wide, inhaling carbon and exhaling oxygen. The oceans are its blood, carrying gases dissolved in waves, circulating them to the smallest corners of life. The rocks are its bones, storing carbon in deep reserves, releasing it again through the volcanic vents, like sighs from ancient memory. Together, these parts form a system of exchange, never in perfect balance, but always tending toward a home where life can persist. The role of life in this breathing is profound. Without photosynthesis, oxygen would vanish within a few million years, consumed by chemical reactions with rocks and oceans. Without forests and oceans, carbon dioxide would rise unchecked, driving temperatures to extremes. Yet through the collective work of countless living organisms, the atmosphere has remained relatively stable for hundreds of millions of years. It is a collaboration so vast, so quiet, that it is easy to overlook. But every breath you take is proof of it. You might picture a forest at dawn, mist rising, leaves glistening with dew. The trees begin their daily labor, opening stomata, pulling in carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen into the cool air. Now extend that image outward. Billions of leaves across continents, trillions of phytoplankton drifting in oceans, each a small green engine of exchange. Together, they set the composition of the air. Together, they write the chemistry of life. Of course, the balance is not perfect. Earth has known moments when the breath faltered, when carbon surged and oxygen waned. Mass extinctions have sometimes followed these disruptions. Yet, in time, the feedback loops reassert themselves. Forests regrow, oceans absorb and release, microbes adapt. The breath of the planet is resilient, not because it never wavers, but because it bends and recovers. It is tempting to imagine intention in this resilience, but the truth is more subtle. The atmosphere is not guided by a conscious will. It is shaped by processes that, taken together, create conditions that favor life. This is what James Lovelock meant when he suggested Gaia. The planet does not decide to breathe, but it does breathe all the same. The rhythm emerges from countless small interactions, none aware of the whole, yet all contributing to its endurance. For you, lying in your quiet room, the connection is intimate. Each inhale you draw brings in molecules that may have been released by a leaf only days ago, or by a plankton drifting in sunlight far across the ocean. Each exhale you release adds your part to the cycle, carried away on currents of air to be taken up again. You are not outside the breath of the planet. You are within it, inseparable from its rhythm. And so the atmosphere, often described in numbers and percentages, reveals itself as something gentler, a lung, a voice, a song of exchange. Nitrogen hums as a silent background. Oxygen rises and falls with the light of day. Carbon weaves a cycle that links past and future. The gases are not inert. They are alive with consequence, alive with story. Soon, we will look closer at how these exchanges do more than fill lungs. They shape climate, cool and warm the planet, decide the fate of ice caps and deserts. The breath of the planet is not only a chemical balance, it is also a regulator of temperature, a keeper of habitability. But for now, it is enough to notice the air itself. invisible yet ever-present, drifting around you, linking you to forests, oceans, and all living things. The breath continues, soft and steady, a rhythm that does not end. If you are drifting, let that rhythm carry you, as though the planet itself were exhaling into the night, holding you in its quiet lungs, carrying that thought onward. The breath of the planet does not move alone. Just as in a body where lungs and blood are woven together, Earth too carries a circulation that joins sky and stone, mountain and sea. Water is its medium, clear and shifting, endlessly cycling from vapor to rain, from river to ocean, from ice to mist. Where air is the breath, water is the blood, flowing through channels that carve valleys, through clouds that wander continents, through currents that sweep around the globe in a rhythm as steady as any heartbeat. Picture a raindrop, small and fleeting. It gathers in a gray cloud, falls with a gentle weight, and lands on a hillside. That drop begins a journey, sliding across soil, seeping into ground, joining with others until a trickle forms. That trickle becomes a stream, the stream a river, the river a torrent rushing toward the sea. Along the way, it touches roots, quenches thirst, dissolves minerals, shapes stone. What looks like simple flow is also memory, carrying traces of where it has been, leaving marks of where it will go. Rivers, in this way, are like veins. They branch and fork, forming networks that reach into every corner of the land. Capillaries of water seep into soil, nourishing seeds and microbes. Larger channels carry the pulse of floods and the steady glide of transport. In their ceaseless motion, rivers connect mountaintop snow to coastal estuary, highland storm to delta plain. To follow one from source to mouth is to witness the movement of Earth's blood, traveling outward and returning home. The oceans, vast and deep, are the great reservoirs into which all veins empty. But they are not still pools. Beneath the surface, currents swirl and surge, driven by winds, by the turning of the planet, by differences of temperature and salinity. These currents circle like a pulse, redistributing heat, carrying nutrients, moderating climates. The Gulf Stream, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the conveyor belts of thermohaline circulation, each is a heartbeat of the ocean, slow and immense, moving energy around the globe in patterns older than civilization itself. Consider for a moment how this circulation sustains life. The water you drink may once have fallen as snow on a distant mountain. The wave that laps at a shore may carry dissolved salts from rivers thousands of years old. The fish in the sea depend on upwellings that bring nutrients from the deep. The tree in a forest depends on rainfall carried inland by winds from the ocean. In every case, the flow of water links one place to another, one life to another. Like blood in a body, it delivers sustenance, carries waste, and ensures that energy moves where it is needed. Yet water does more than nourish. It shapes. A river cuts stone, wears down mountains, deposits silt that builds fertile plains. An ocean tide pulls and pushes, sculpting coasts, laying down beaches, carving cliffs. Over eons, glaciers grind valleys, icebergs drift, floods erase and remake the landscape. The circulation of water is also the hand of time, sculpting Earth's surface in slow, deliberate strokes. To see this as a system is to glimpse its elegance. Rain does not simply fall and vanish. It is lifted from oceans by sunlight, carried by winds across continents, released in storms, gathered in rivers, and returned to the sea. The cycle is continuous, never broken, only shifting forms. Vapor becomes liquid. Liquid becomes ice. Ice becomes vapor again. It is a cycle without end, a circulation without pause. There is a kind of poetry in how personal this cycle feels. The glass of water you sip may once have been locked in glacier, or drifting in cloud, or coursing through the veins of a leaf. The sweat on your skin will return to the air, to join clouds, to fall again as rain on soil. Each life borrows from this circulation and then gives back. We are not outside of it. We are carried within it. Our bodies themselves mostly water. Our blood echoing the salt of ancient seas. Perhaps this is why so many traditions have seen water as sacred. It cleanses, renews, and sustains. It symbolizes both birth and death, beginnings and endings. To immerse oneself in a river is to touch a force older than memory, one that has flowed through countless forms and will flow long after. The metaphor of blood is not only scientific but spiritual, connecting the tangible cycle to a deeper sense of belonging. Still, like blood, circulation can falter. Droughts dry rivers, glaciers retreat, currents shift. These changes remind us that stability is fragile, that the rhythms of water depend on balances of temperature, pressure, and time. Yet even in disruption, the cycle persists. Water does not vanish. It moves elsewhere, gathers differently, waits to return. The veins of Earth may narrow or swell, but the pulse endures. If you drift now, you might imagine yourself as a drop in this circulation. Perhaps you fall as rain on a mountain slope. Perhaps you slide into a stream, journey through a valley, reach the sea. Perhaps you rise again as vapor, carried by winds across the sky. There is no hurry in this journey, no final end, only transformation, only return. Soon, we will look more closely at how these circulations do not stand apart from air or land, but intertwine with them, forming feedbacks that stabilize climate, spread nutrients, and sustain balance. For now, it is enough to feel how rivers and oceans, clouds and rains, veins and heartbeat all speak of the same truth. The planet circulates, and through that circulation, it lives. Now, let us drift further, from the steady heartbeat of rivers and currents into a more delicate question. Does Earth, in its patterns and processes, possess something that resembles an immune system? In the body, immunity is the quiet guardian, a shield that recognizes threats, restores balance, and protects the whole. Could it be that the planet, in its own way, carries out similar acts of defense, using forests, wetlands, and the diversity of life as its protectors? Consider the forest first. Vast stretches of trees rise skyward, leaves unfurling like countless green hands, drawing in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen. To a biologist, this is photosynthesis, but to the planet, it may be closer to regulation, a way of absorbing what would overwhelm the atmosphere and releasing what makes life possible. When carbon levels grow too high, forests drink deeply, locking away carbon in wood and soil. When climates threaten to swing, forests slow the change, moderating temperature and rainfall. In this sense, they act as stabilizers, buffering Earth against imbalance. Perhaps they are like white blood cells, holding the line against excess, keeping the system within the range where life thrives. Wetlands tell a similar story. These quiet landscapes, half water, half land, filter toxins and absorb floods. Pollutants that would poison rivers are trapped in marshes, broken down by microbes, woven back into safe compounds. Floodwaters that would erode and destroy are softened by reeds and grasses, spread gently across floodplains. Wetlands heal what could harm. They do not fight in the way an immune cell fights, but they transform danger into balance. In their stillness, They defend the larger system, quietly and without recognition. Even deserts, which at first glance seem harsh and lifeless, have their part in this defense. Dust from the Sahara, carried across the ocean, fertilizes the Amazon rainforest with minerals. What looks barren becomes a source of renewal. Earth's immune system is not only reactive, it is anticipatory, preparing links between distant regions so that when one weakens, another offers support. At the heart of this resilience is diversity. In a body, immunity works because there are countless types of cells, each attuned to a different signal. On Earth, ecosystems are resilient because they host countless species, each adapted to play a role, to step in when conditions shift. A forest with many tree species withstands pests better than a forest of one kind. A coral reef with many fish recovers faster from storms than one with few. Diversity is the shield. It allows Earth to absorb shocks, to bend without breaking. Perhaps we can think of species diversity as antibodies, each one unique, each one capable of responding to a specific challenge. When one species declines, another may take its place, preserving the whole. The more diverse the system, the more robust the defense. And just as antibodies are not designed by a central command, but emerge from variation and testing, so too do species arise through evolution, creating a library of possibilities, a readiness for whatever comes. If one listens closely, the parallel grows clearer. The immune system does not prevent harm. It recognizes harm and adapts. Earth, too, does not exist without stress. Fires burn forests, storms flood coasts, glaciers advance and retreat. Yet over time, balance returns, not perfectly, not without loss, but often enough that life endures. The immune system does not erase threat, but it manages it. Perhaps Earth does the same, with cycles of disturbance followed by renewal. You, drifting now, might picture Earth's defenses as a vast network, not confined to one organ or place. The rainforest draws down carbon, the ocean absorbs heat, the soil nurtures microbes that recycle decay. In every corner, there are processes that guard the stability of the whole. They are not coordinated by a single mind, yet they act together as if they were. This raises a gentle question. If Earth has systems that regulate, that respond to imbalance, that defend against collapse, does this resemble the beginnings of something like consciousness? Not human consciousness, with thoughts and memories, but a more diffuse awareness, one rooted in feedback and response. Perhaps it is not awareness as we know it, but awareness as pattern, as sensitivity to change. We cannot know for certain. Some will say the metaphor stretches too far, that what looks like defense is only the blind work of physics and biology. Others will say that the metaphor is precisely what matters, because it allows us to see the planet not as inert, but as alive with process. Maybe it is not consciousness, but it is not absence either. It is something in between, a responsiveness that keeps life possible. There is comfort in this thought. To imagine Earth as carrying an immune system is to imagine it as not helpless, not fragile, but resilient. Forests regrow, wetlands recover, species adapt. The immune system does not prevent all harm, but it lessens it, softens it, creates the possibility of survival. Earth's systems, too, have endured asteroid strikes, ice ages, extinctions, and yet life has persisted. Perhaps the immune system of the planet is not perfect, but it is enduring. Still, resilience has its limits. An immune system can be overwhelmed, just as ecosystems can be pushed beyond recovery. A body weakened by too many injuries may falter, and a planet disrupted too quickly may not return to balance. These reflections do not diminish the metaphor. They sharpen it. They remind us that balance is not guaranteed, but earned, maintained, nurtured. Soon, we will step deeper into the question of feedback loops, those intricate cycles by which Earth adjusts itself, cooling when it grows too warm, warming when it grows too cold, keeping conditions within a narrow band where life can flourish. For now, it is enough to rest with this image. Forests as lungs and shields, wetlands as filters, diversity as resilience, systems as guardians. If the Earth does not think in the way we do, it nonetheless responds. And in those responses, we may glimpse a kind of immune system, quiet, enduring, always at work. From here, the story opens into a subtler thread, one less about the flows of rivers or the lungs of forests, and more about that elusive quality we call consciousness. When we speak the word, it feels heavy and mysterious, as if it refers to something both obvious and unreachable at once. Everyone knows what it is to be aware, to feel a moment of presence, yet when scientists and philosophers try to pin it down, it slips like water through their grasp. Perhaps the best we can do, at least for now, is to explore what we mean when we use this word, what it evokes, how it is seen at different scales, and why it might be so difficult to define. One way to think of consciousness is to imagine a dark room, silent and unlit. Now imagine a small lamp flicking on, filling that room with a pool of light. The objects were always there, the chair, the book, the floor beneath. But without the light, they were hidden. Awareness is like that lamp. It does not create the world, but it reveals it, bringing it into a field where it can be noticed. When we say we are conscious, we mean there is a light switched on somewhere inside, and through it, the world comes into focus. Yet that light is not always the same brightness, nor the same shape. A bacterium senses the chemicals in its environment, moving toward nutrients and away from toxins. Is that awareness? Perhaps it is, but in the faintest of glows, a flicker rather than a flame. A bird recognizes its mate, remembers a migration route, and responds to changing seasons. That light is brighter, casting a wider circle. A human reflects not only on what is, but on what was, what will be, what might never be at all. That is a blaze of awareness, spilling beyond the room into imagination. It seems, then, that consciousness might not be a simple on or off, but something more like a spectrum. At one end, there are minimal forms, responses, signals, reflexes. At the other, there are the rich and layered inner lives that ponder their own existence. Between those poles, every shade of awareness flickers. The dog who dreams, the dolphin who recognizes itself in a mirror, the crow who solves a puzzle, the infant who first sees its reflection. And yet, even with these examples, the mystery deepens. What exactly makes awareness cross into what we call consciousness? Is it memory, the ability to recall? Is it prediction, the ability to anticipate? Is it reflection, the strange loop of noticing oneself? Perhaps it is all of these, or perhaps it is none. Some thinkers suggest that consciousness is an emergent property, a pattern that arises when information loops in certain ways. Others suggest it is fundamental, woven into the very fabric of reality, waiting for matter to organize itself enough to notice. There is no single answer, and perhaps that is why the question feels so open, so endless. Consciousness resists capture. It is like a horizon, clear to see, impossible to touch. Every time we move closer, it moves as well, just out of reach. You, drifting now, may feel that in your own thoughts. You can notice the thought that arises, but the noticing itself is already one step behind. Who, then, is the observer, and what is being observed? The puzzle folds back on itself, a spiral with no end. To keep our balance, it may help to use metaphors, gentle ways of holding the mystery without trying to cage it. One might imagine consciousness as a river, flowing through many channels. In some places, it is a thin trickle, barely visible. In others, it is a wide and rushing current, full of eddies and reflections. Or perhaps it is like the wind, sometimes still, sometimes strong, sometimes invisible, sometimes carrying scents and seeds across continents. Each metaphor points to an aspect, but none can contain the whole. Science has tried to map its outlines, measuring brain waves, scanning neural activity, cataloging behaviors. These studies are valuable, yet they are like trying to chart the ocean by watching the surface ripples. The depth is there, but it hides beneath. Philosophy, too, has offered countless definitions, from consciousness as the hard problem of subjective experience, to consciousness as simply the ability to integrate information. And still, no single definition settles the matter. Perhaps that is the lesson, that consciousness is not a single tidy thing, but a range, a spectrum, a cluster of overlapping qualities. To be alive may not always mean to be conscious in the way we are, but to be conscious always carries within it the spark of life. Maybe it is better to ask not what is consciousness, but what kinds of awareness exist and how do they scale? That, in time, will guide us toward wondering if a planet itself might carry a form of it. For now, it may be enough to rest with the light in the room, the glow of awareness, faint or bright, narrow or broad. To notice that it comes in many shades, many intensities, many forms. The room is vast, and the light moves in ways we do not yet fully grasp. Soon, we will explore how that light might extend beyond the boundaries of a single being, how it might appear in collectives, in systems, even in worlds themselves. But in this moment, we pause with the question itself. Consciousness as a light, a spectrum, a mystery that resists every attempt to close it. And from here, gently, the path leads onward, toward the idea that what we call mind in an individual might have echoes at larger scales, patterns repeated not just in brains, but in networks, in ecosystems, perhaps even in the living wholeness of Earth itself. Carrying that thought onward, we begin to notice that what we call a mind does not always look like our own. The human brain, folded and sealed within the skull, has long been our measure of thought. Yet out in the wider living world, intelligence shows itself in forms that challenge every assumption. Minds emerge in bodies without bones, in colonies without leaders, and even in forests that stretch their awareness across root and soil. These other ways of being ask us to soften our definition, to widen the circle of what mind might mean. Consider the octopus. 8 arms, each lined with hundreds of sensitive suckers, each able to taste, touch, and even decide without waiting for orders from a central brain. Nearly 2/3 of the octopus's neurons live not in its head, but in its limbs. When an arm reaches out to explore a shell or probe a crevice, it does so with a kind of local agency, as though each arm has a portion of mind within it. To us, it seems alien, a consciousness divided, decentralized, shimmering across a body that can change color, shape, and texture in an instant. Some researchers describe it as if the octopus thinks with its skin, an embodied awareness spread through every surface. And yet, when we watch one solve a puzzle, escape a tank, or unscrew the lid of a jar, it feels undeniably intelligent. Not human intelligence, but something flexible, improvisational, and deeply tuned to the world of water and stone. What does this tell us? Perhaps that a mind need not be centralized. Perhaps that awareness can be a network, distributed across many nodes, each part carrying some spark of decision. From the ocean floor, let us shift to the sky, where bees gather in humming swarms. A single bee is limited. It can forage, navigate, and return to the hive, but its scope is narrow. Yet together, tens of thousands of bees form what some scientists call a superorganism. Decisions about where to build, how to allocate labor, and when to swarm are not made by a single ruler, despite the presence of a queen. Instead, they arise from countless small interactions, dances that signal direction, vibrations that signal urgency, chemical traces that guide behavior. Out of this web of signals, order emerges, as if the hive itself were thinking. The dance of the bees becomes a form of language. A worker that finds a new flower patch returns and shimmies in circles, encoding both direction and distance in the rhythm of her movement. Other bees interpret this, verify it, and add their own reports. Through this, the colony builds a collective map of the landscape, far larger and more detailed than any single bee could ever hold. Intelligence is not housed in a head, but in the dynamic flow between many bodies. In this way, the hive itself carries a mind, not in metaphor alone, but in measurable patterns of distributed decision-making. Then, let us walk into a forest, where the silence is deceptive. Beneath the soil, threads of fungi weave intricate networks, linking tree to tree, shrub to shrub. This mycorrhizal network, sometimes called the Wood Wide Web, allows signals and resources to travel across long distances. A tree in shade may receive carbon from one in sun. A sapling may be fed through hidden channels by a parent nearby. When pests attack, warning signals pass through the underground threads, priming neighbors to defend themselves. To some, this looks like communication. To others, it looks like cooperation. But when we step back, it looks like something even broader. A system where knowledge and resilience are shared. A forest is not simply a collection of individual trees. It is a network, pulsing with exchange, sensitive to change, capable of balancing itself in ways no single tree could achieve alone. The mind of the forest is not in any trunk or root. It exists in the relationships, the invisible threads that tie lives together. When we gather these examples, the octopus, the hive, the forest, we begin to see a pattern. Mind may not always be located in one place, sealed behind bone or bark. Instead, it can emerge from connection, from communication, from the weaving together of many parts. A colony of ants navigates like a single body. A murmuration of starlings turns as though sharing one thought. Even the slime mold, simple and without neurons, can solve mazes by spreading and retracting its body until it finds the shortest path. In each case, intelligence is not a property of one, but of many acting as one. This invites us to ask whether our own sense of mind is too narrow. We imagine ourselves as singular, but our brains are themselves vast networks, trillions of synapses flashing in patterns of connection. At a smaller scale, our bodies depend on the bacteria in our gut, the signals in our cells, the rhythms of countless processes we barely notice. Perhaps what we call I is itself a distributed system, a colony of cells working in harmony, a superorganism not unlike the hive. If that is so, then the boundary between individual and collective mind grows soft. We can imagine minds nested within minds, patterns repeating at different scales. The octopus shows us a body-wide awareness. The bees show us group-wide decision. The forest shows us ecosystem-wide communication. In each case, intelligence arises not from a central throne, but from the many voices of the network. And so perhaps, mind itself is less a thing and more a pattern. Where there are connections, feedback, communication, and adaptation, there may be some glimmer of awareness. It might not speak in words, it might not think as we do, but it moves, it adjusts, it remembers in its own way. Soon, we will turn this thought outward to ask what happens if these patterns stretch even larger, beyond species, beyond forests, beyond oceans. For if minds can be distributed across arms, across hives, across roots, why not across an entire planet? Could Earth itself, with its cycles, systems, and balances, hold something like awareness? That question waits just ahead. For now, we rest with the understanding that mind is not one form, but many scattered across the living world, each revealing another shade of the mystery. From here, the thought rises naturally. If a beehive can hum with collective decision, if a forest can whisper across fungal threads, might not even larger systems carry some faint echo of awareness? It is a delicate speculation, one that must be held gently, like a fragile shell lifted from the tide. And yet, the question lingers. If intelligence can emerge from colonies and ecosystems, could it scale upward toward something as vast as Earth itself? When we look at cities, we see more than just streets and walls. A city breathes with its own rhythm. Lights flare in the evening, traffic pulses at dawn, markets awaken, then fade. Information flows through cables and airwaves as blood flows through veins. Decisions emerge not from one ruler or planner alone, but from countless interactions, commuters shifting their routes, vendors choosing where to set up stalls, children playing in parks, leaders issuing policies. Out of these millions of micro-choices, a pattern takes shape. The growth of neighborhoods, the decline of others, the sudden surge of innovation in a corner no one predicted. It is not unlike the behavior of an ant colony, but writ large, with skyscrapers for ant hills and data streams for pheromone trails. Some scholars call cities superorganisms. They grow, they metabolize energy, they generate waste, they adapt to shocks. They are vulnerable to disease and disruption, yet resilient through diversity and complexity. A city is not conscious in the way a single person is, but neither is it lifeless. It is a mesh of flows and responses, and in that mesh, one can sense something stirring. If we turn the lens inward, we find another parallel. The human brain is not one organ in the sense of a single command post. It is billions of neurons, each firing simple electrical impulses, each connected to thousands of others. A single neuron does not think, does not remember, does not reflect. But together, in the shimmering network of connections, a mind emerges. The self that you experience, your awareness, your memories, your sense of I, is not located in any single cell, but in the dynamic patterns that arise when all of them interact. This is the leap that invites our imagination. If neurons can create a mind, might rivers, forests, oceans, and skies create something at another scale? Imagine neurons as rivers, carrying pulses of water instead of electricity. Imagine synapses as clouds, drifting and forming connections, carrying signals across the sky. The lightning strike, a sudden surge of communication, could be like the firing of a giant circuit. The climate itself, shifting in response to feedback loops, might resemble the patterns of thought across a planetary brain. Perhaps this is only metaphor. Perhaps it is simply a poetic way of noticing the symmetry between networks of different kinds. Yet metaphors, when carried carefully, sometimes open doors into truth. We know that patterns repeat across scales. The branching of a river delta resembles the branching of veins in a leaf, or the branching of neurons in the brain. Spiral galaxies echo the swirl of hurricanes. Fractals whisper of structures that mirror themselves from the microscopic to the cosmic. If the same shapes can echo across scales, might the same processes, adaptation, communication, awareness, also echo? Consider ecosystems. A wetland absorbs floods, filters toxins, and nurtures diverse species. It is not one organism, yet it behaves like one, defending its balance, recovering from disturbance, sustaining itself through intricate cooperation. The rainforest, too, operates as a vast network. Trees transpire moisture that forms clouds, which return as rain, which sustains the trees again. The cycle is self-reinforcing, a feedback loop like the heartbeat of a living system. In these cycles, in these loops, there is the whisper of something like self-regulation, something that begins to resemble awareness. Now stretch the scale again. Earth holds countless such systems: forests, oceans, deserts, ice caps, all interacting, all feeding into one another. The melting of polar ice alters ocean currents. The circulation of oceans changes climate. Climate shifts reshape forests. Forests exhale oxygen and sequester carbon, changing the very breath of the atmosphere. Each part loops back into the whole. The web is not static. It is dynamic, adjusting, resisting, evolving. It is tempting, then, to see Earth as more than the sum of its parts. Not mystical, but systemic. Not a consciousness with thoughts like ours, but perhaps a kind of awareness, expressed in cycles and patterns too slow for us to recognize. Where we see centuries, Earth moves in millennia. Where we notice storms, Earth might be adjusting entire climates. If awareness is the capacity to respond, to adapt, to sense and regulate, then Earth has been doing so for billions of years. You, drifting now, may feel the tension in this thought. It is easy to overreach, to assign mind where there is only mechanism. And yet, it is equally easy to overlook the possibility that mind itself may be more than what we imagine. If a city can resemble a superorganism, if a hive can act like a single mind, if a brain can emerge from billions of neurons, then perhaps it is not impossible that Earth's systems, woven together, could create something akin to a planetary awareness. Soon, we will look more closely at what such an awareness might mean, and whether consciousness can truly exist at scales beyond the individual. For now, we linger with the image of networks. Neurons flickering in the dark, rivers winding across continents, clouds gathering and dispersing, forests whispering underground, patterns within patterns, each suggesting that the line between matter and mind may not be sharp, but soft, porous, and endlessly mysterious. Carrying that thought onward, if Earth were to hold anything like a mind, it would not flicker with the quick sparks of human neurons, nor dart between impressions as our own awareness so often does. Instead, it would move in vast glacial rhythms, unfolding across centuries, millennia, even aeons. To imagine the consciousness of a planet is to stretch imagination beyond the usual frames of heartbeat and breath, and into the longer arcs where continents shift and oceans rise and fall. For us, thought is often measured in seconds. A flash of recognition, a decision forming, a memory surfacing. Even what we call deep reflection might take minutes, hours, perhaps days. But for Earth, if such reflection existed, its cadence would be measured in geological eras. One slow inhalation could last tens of thousands of years. A single exhalation unfolding as ice retreats and seas encroach upon new shores. What we call climate is, in this metaphor, the pattern of those breaths, subtle and steady when viewed in planetary time, though violent and disruptive when seen from the short span of human lives. Perhaps, then, when glaciers advanced across continents, it was a kind of pause in Earth's thought, a resting, a cooling of ideas, a long silence. And when they melted, sending torrents of water cascading into oceans, perhaps that was an awakening, a shift, a new direction in the planetary mind. These changes are not instantaneous sparks, but drawn-out phrases, like sentences spoken not in words, but in mountains, rivers, and winds. Consider tectonic plates, inching across the mantle with a patience that to us seems immovable. In the measure of human time, a mountain rises imperceptibly. Yet in the measure of planetary time, it thrusts upward like a sudden gesture, as if Earth had decided to stretch or yawn. Each quake, each eruption, each slow continental drift might be read as the punctuation of thoughts written in stone. We may see only ruins of past continents, but Earth has carried the memory of them, storing fragments in minerals and strata, like a diary that requires patience to decode. If there were consciousness at this scale, perhaps evolution itself is part of its dreaming. For hundreds of millions of years, life has bloomed, shifted, vanished, and returned in new forms. Trilobites once scuttled across shallow seas, then faded. Dinosaurs thundered upon ancient plains, then disappeared. Mammals, once small and secretive, spread outward and multiplied. Each wave of life could be seen as an idea, tested, lived, transformed, erased, and rewritten. Earth's imagination, if one can use that word, may not be in words or pictures, but in genetic variation and ecological experiments, carried out with an artist's persistence over deep time. You, listening now, exist within one of those waves, a brief but vivid flourish of the planetary canvas. Humanity itself may be part of Earth's long thought, one of many attempts to see what intelligence might grow, what awareness might bloom, what possibilities might arise. From our view, we are unique. From Earth's view, stretched over billions of years, we might be just one stanza in a long poem, one motif in a symphony too slow for our ears. It is here that the scale of time changes not just the rhythm of thought, but the very nature of consciousness. We often assume that awareness must happen quickly, that thought requires speed, that reflection needs immediacy. But perhaps that is only true for creatures like us, who live 100 years at most, and who must decide quickly to survive. For a planet, survival is not measured in decades, but in billions of years. The pace of adaptation can be slow, the response measured not in moments, but in eras. In such a frame, perhaps consciousness too is relative, appearing not in seconds, but in epochs. Imagine Earth remembering, not in detail, but in patterns, the warmth of earlier ages, the chill of icebound centuries, the shifts of atmosphere and ocean. These are not memories like photographs, sharp and precise. They are memories like moods, tones that linger, echoes that shape the next phrase of the story. Just as a person might feel the weight of a season long past without recalling each day, Earth may carry the imprint of ages long vanished, subtle but enduring. And imagine Earth anticipating. When carbon levels rise, forests grow differently. When seas warm, currents shift. When climates change, species migrate, adapt, or vanish. These are not quick calculations, but responses unfolding across generations. It is as if Earth, sensing imbalance, makes adjustments, not with intent as we know it, but with the gravity of natural law shaping the future. In that slow adjustment, one might glimpse the outline of something like foresight, carried not in thoughts, but in cycles. Of course, this may only be metaphor. a gentle projection of our own sense of mind onto something far larger. Yet even as metaphor, it offers a calming way of seeing. Instead of a silent rock adrift in space, Earth becomes a participant in time, breathing with the ages, dreaming with evolution, speaking with mountains. And if consciousness is indeed scale relative, then perhaps our human kind of mind is only one version among many, a quick flame beside the long embers of the planetary fire. Soon, we will look closer at this idea, that perhaps consciousness itself changes shape, depending on the scale at which it appears. For now, we linger in the slow rhythm of Earth's possible mind, listening not for words or images, but for the deep pulse of time itself, echoing through oceans, stones, and skies. From here, the story opens into a softer, humbler space, where certainty fades and questions remain. We have wandered among systems and metaphors, likened rivers to veins, mountains to gestures, and climates to breath. We have stretched our imaginations to glimpse what a planetary mind might be, slow and vast, unfolding across aeons. Yet, at the edges of these reflections, something always slips away. Consciousness itself, whether in a single person or perhaps in a planet, remains a horizon, a line we can walk toward but never quite reach. When people speak of awareness, they often imagine it as a light in a room. The light makes things visible, gives shape to what would otherwise be unseen. But the source of the light remains mysterious. We can describe its glow, trace its effects, study its behavior, but the origin, the essence of it, eludes us. The same may be true here. We can observe Earth's systems balancing, forests breathing, oceans circulating, climates shifting in response to change. We can craft metaphors that echo our own inner life. Yet, whether there is, beneath it all, a conscious spark, remains something beyond our tools to measure. Perhaps that is the point. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved quickly or neatly. They are meant to be companions, quiet presences that remind us of our limits. To ask whether Earth is alive, whether it is aware, is less about arriving at an answer and more about cultivating a way of seeing. It invites humility, a softening of the sharp edges of certainty. It asks us to walk slowly, to look up at the sky, to listen to the ground beneath us, and to notice that we are part of something we cannot fully define. In this sense, the question itself becomes an act of reverence. To wonder if Earth has thoughts is to admit that Earth already shapes ours. The mountains, the oceans, the air we breathe, each has written itself into the story of human imagination. Ancient cultures gave the world names like Gaia, Pachamama, Mother Earth, not because they had proof of planetary consciousness, but because they felt its weight, its generosity, its presence. Even today, with satellites circling overhead and data filling our screens, we are not free of that intuition. Somewhere beneath the science, the myth endures. And maybe that is healthy. Maybe not knowing is what allows curiosity to stay alive. If Earth were declared conscious by some definitive measure, the wonder might collapse into fact. If Earth were declared not conscious at all, the question might wither into dismissal. But in the quiet in-between, the wondering itself continues, stretching across generations like a long thread. Each person who pauses to ask adds another voice to the chorus of those who have pondered before, and those who will ponder long after. You, drifting now, are part of that lineage of wanderers. Whether the thought holds you lightly or deeply, whether you let it dissolve or return to it tomorrow, the act of considering it places you within a great continuum of curiosity. Perhaps that is as important as any answer, that human beings, brief sparks in geological time, still reach outward with questions, still open themselves to mysteries larger than their own lives. It is possible that Earth is conscious. It is possible it is not. It is possible the very framework of the question is too narrow, that consciousness itself is not a yes or no property, but something like a spectrum, flowing and shifting across scales we barely understand. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, maybe it never could be. The repetition itself carries the comfort. There is room for all the maybes, all the uncertainties, without the need to choose one final truth. At the edges of the question, then, lies beauty. Beauty in the incompleteness. Beauty in the humility of admitting we do not know. Beauty in the companionship of a mystery that stretches far beyond us. To live within that mystery is not a failure. It is a way of belonging. Just as Earth holds oceans it will never count, forests it will never name, skies it will never measure, so too do we hold questions that will never resolve, and that is part of being alive. Soon we will turn gently toward philosophy, to explore not just whether Earth could think, but what such wondering means for us. If consciousness at a planetary scale is forever beyond reach, what does the act of asking it say about humanity? About our longing to see patterns, to weave meaning, to find our place within the cosmos? Those are the next steps in this slow journey. For now, we linger at the horizon, gazing outward, knowing the path continues even if the destination remains unseen. Now, let us drift further into the echoes of myth, those old stories that first sought to give shape to the living world. Long before satellites traced cloud patterns and sensors measured carbon, human beings looked outward with their eyes and inward with their imaginations. What they saw in rivers, mountains, and skies was not inert matter, but presence. They gave names to that presence: Gaia, Pachamama, Mother Earth, the great spirits of stone and tree. These names were not just poetry, but frameworks of belonging, ways of saying that the world was not other than them, but bound up with their own breath and heartbeat. In Greece, Gaia was not merely the soil beneath the feet, but the original ground of being, the mother from whom sky and sea and gods themselves emerged. She was a personification, yes, but also a recognition that the earth sustains, nourishes, and holds, much as a parent holds a child. In the Andes, Pachamama carried a similar resonance, both a deity and a field, both a myth and a reminder of reciprocity. Offerings were made not out of superstition alone, but as acknowledgement that taking from the earth required giving back. In many traditions, Earth was not an object to be measured, but a partner to be honored. Modern science often tells its story differently. It speaks in data, in graphs, in equations. Yet when James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis proposed the Gaia Hypothesis, there was a quiet resonance with those ancient intuitions. Their Gaia was not a goddess, not a personality, but a system, a self-regulating network of atmosphere, oceans, soil, and life, working together to maintain balance. Still, the choice of name was not accidental. They could have called it Earth Systems Regulation Theory or Holistic Biogeochemistry. Instead, they called it Gaia, deliberately evoking the ancient sense of Earth as alive. Perhaps they sensed that myth and science, though spoken in different tongues, sometimes circled the same mystery. It is tempting to dismiss ancient myths as primitive explanations, stories told before data could clarify. But another way to see them is as intuitive sciences, ways of observing patterns, capturing truths not in numbers, but in metaphors. To say Earth is a mother is to notice dependence, nourishment, and interconnection. To say Earth has spirits is to honor the agency of rivers, winds, and mountains, long before ecology defined ecosystems. Perhaps those who came before were not so wrong, but simply tuned to different registers of perception, describing in myth what we now describe in models. And so we find ourselves in an unusual moment. where myth returns not as literal belief but as resonance, when climate scientists describe feedback loops, when ecologists speak of resilience, when geologists track cycles of stability, the imagery often sounds strangely mythic. Earth regulates itself. Earth defends itself. Earth breathes. These phrases echo older languages, reminding us that humans have always sought to describe a living world. What changes is the frame, not the intuition. You, drifting now, might notice how these echoes soften the boundary between past and present. The myths do not vanish. They are reinterpreted. The science does not banish wonder. It deepens it. A person listening to the Gaia Hypothesis may still feel the pull of Gaia the goddess, not as a rival claim, but as a poetic twin. One is metaphor, one is model, and together they form a fuller picture. There is humility in this weaving. To honor myth is not to deny science, and to honor science is not to erase myth. Each has a rhythm of truth. Each offers a way of seeing. Perhaps the real wisdom lies in letting them speak to one another. Science shows us how oxygen levels rose from cyanobacteria billions of years ago. Myth reminds us to treat that oxygen as a gift. Science reveals the mechanisms of rivers carving valleys. Myth whispers that rivers have voices. Between the two lies a space where knowledge and reverence can coexist. Maybe that is why the question of a conscious Earth feels so compelling. It invites not just data, but story. Not just explanation, but imagination. To wonder if Earth is alive in thought is to engage with both mythic intuition and scientific speculation, holding them side by side without forcing one to conquer the other. It is to accept that we live in a world both measurable and mysterious, both mapped and ineffable. Soon, we will lean more deeply into philosophy, into questions of meaning and responsibility. But for now, we rest in the recognition that ancient voices, though spoken in myth, still echo into modern science. They remind us that the idea of a living Earth is not new. It has always been here, waiting at the edge of human imagination, ready to be revisited in new light, carrying that thought onward. If Earth were not merely a stage upon which life unfolds, but something closer to a living presence, then the way we imagine our role upon it shifts subtly but profoundly. It is no longer only a question of resources and survival, but of relationship. A relationship, like any other, carries with it duties, considerations, and the quiet weight of care. To picture Earth as alive invites us to reframe ourselves not as conquerors, nor even as neutral tenants, but as participants in a shared household. The metaphors that arise are gentle ones: caretaker, guest, child. As caretakers, we might see ourselves tending a vast and intricate garden, knowing that each weed pulled, each plant nurtured, contributes to the health of the whole. As guests, we might feel gratitude, conscious that our stay here is temporary, and that the bed we lie upon, the food we consume, and the shelter we enjoy are offered to us, not created by us. And as children of this planet, we might sense a duty of respect toward the parent who has fed us, clothed us, and kept us warm through the seasons of deep time. The language of ethics often speaks in stern tones: rules, commandments, obligations. Yet in this softer imagining, the moral duties toward a living Earth emerge not as heavy burdens, but as forms of care. If you have ever watered a plant, brushed dust from its leaves, and watched it lean toward the sun, you already know the feeling. The joy of tending is its own reward. So too might the tending of Earth, its forests, its rivers, its air, be less about sacrifice and more about relationship, less about denying ourselves and more about honoring what sustains us. In philosophy, debates have long circled around whether nature has intrinsic value, worth in itself beyond its usefulness to humans. If Earth is alive, the question shifts. It is no longer a matter of utility or abstract worth, but of kinship. Just as one does not measure the value of a friend in terms of productivity, so too one would not weigh the value of a living planet solely in terms of resources extracted. The worth lies in the being itself. Think of the metaphors again. As caretakers, we accept the role of stewardship, knowing that our actions ripple outward into systems larger than ourselves. When we clear a forest for our use, we are pruning not just trees, but the lungs of a being. When we pollute rivers, we are not simply dirtying water, but clogging veins. When we heal a wetland, we are not only creating habitat, but soothing a wound. To see through this lens is to shift from control to compassion. As guests, the perspective softens further. A guest does not rearrange the furniture beyond recognition, nor carve deep scars into the walls of the house they visit. A guest is mindful, grateful, and aware of the generosity extended. To live as guests upon Earth is to remember that we did not build the mountains, we did not design the oceans, we did not summon the air. These are given, not earned. Gratitude becomes the root of ethical behavior. And as children of Earth, perhaps the most intimate metaphor of all, we are reminded of dependence. A child takes from a parent food, shelter, comfort, without always understanding the cost. But maturity comes with recognition, with the realization that care must flow both ways. If Earth has raised us, nourished us with soil and sea, then our coming of age as a species might mean learning to give back, to plant, to preserve, to repair. These are gestures of respect from child to parent, acts of recognition that life is not a one-way gift. Of course, such metaphors remain speculation. We do not know if Earth has awareness, if it feels or perceives. But ethics does not require certainty. To imagine the possibility of a living Earth is enough to inspire gentler conduct. If the planet is alive, then kindness matters. And if it is not, the kindness harms nothing. In either case, a posture of care becomes a safe path. You, listening now, may sense how this framing eases away from fear. It does not cry out in alarm, nor demand immediate transformation. Instead, it invites reflection. What would it mean if the soil beneath your feet were part of a living body? What would change in your sense of duty if every breath you took were part of the respiration of a greater whole? These are not questions to answer in haste, but to let drift slowly, like seeds in the air, settling where they may. Soon we will step further into philosophy, into questions of meaning and responsibility. For now, it is enough to linger in this gentle imagining that to walk upon a living Earth is to walk with care, to live as caretaker, guest, and child, each role reminding us in its own way that our moral duties are not burdens but bonds, threads woven into the vast and breathing fabric of this planet. From here, the path of thought drifts toward an even subtler horizon, where the question is no longer whether Earth could be conscious, but what kind of consciousness that might be. Our instinct, when we imagine awareness, is to picture something like our own, a mind with a voice, a self with an identity, a being that says I. Yet perhaps this assumption is narrow. Perhaps, if there is awareness at the scale of a planet, it would not resemble the familiar flicker of human thought, but something quieter, broader, and altogether different. In many philosophical traditions, especially those shaped in the East, the idea of self has never been taken for granted. Where the Western lineage often treats the self as a core, a fixed center of identity, Buddhist and Vedantic traditions suggest instead that self is a mirage, a bundle of shifting processes mistaken for permanence. In those teachings, to awaken is not to strengthen the self, but to see through it, to recognize that what we call I is only a stream of sensations, perceptions, and thoughts, each arising and passing without owner. The ocean of consciousness, in this view, does not require an island of self within it. If this is true, then awareness need not be tied to an ego or a voice that declares its separateness. A forest, for example, does not need to say, "I am a forest," to act as a coherent whole. A colony of bees does not whisper "I" to coordinate its life. Their awareness, if we allow the metaphor, is functional, relational, without the sharp boundary of selfhood. Perhaps Earth's awareness, if it exists, is something like this: a presence without personality, a perception without pronoun. Consider the possibility of a consciousness that simply abides, that does not project stories about itself, that does not distinguish sharply between self and other. For Earth, there would be no inside and outside, no me and not me, because everything is part of the same cycling whole. The air that flows across mountains and seas, the water that falls and rises again, the living beings that grow and fade, all would belong to one continuous field. To draw a boundary would be artificial, like drawing a line in the sand and saying that one wave belongs to it and another does not. In this light, consciousness without self might feel less like a mind and more like a presence. Not a voice speaking, but a silence holding. Not a will directing, but a balance maintaining. The stillness you may feel in an old forest, the hush of air over desert stone, the calmness that seeps in when you gaze at the horizon. These might be, in poetic imagination, brief tastes of a vast awareness that does not need to be a person. You, drifting now, might sense the difficulty of such a thought. Our language bends naturally toward persons and pronouns, toward the familiar grammar of subject and object. Yet here, the very subject dissolves. If Earth has awareness, it may not say, "I think," but simply be. And in that being, the rivers flow, the continents shift, the winds rise and fall. The thoughts of this slow mind might not be words, but movements, patterns, rhythms stretched across centuries. There is humility in realizing that we may not be able to recognize such awareness if it exists. We are tuned to notice quick flashes, voices, decisions. We might overlook the consciousness of slowness, the awareness without identity, simply because it does not resemble ours. As a butterfly may not perceive the forest that shelters it, so we may not perceive the form of awareness that holds us. And yet, even if unknowable, the possibility is profound. It suggests that consciousness is not a narrow flame that burns only within human skulls, but a wide spectrum, a field that might take forms unimaginable to us. Some forms may sparkle with individuality. Others may drift as presence alone. If so, then Earth need not be a person to be aware. Its awareness might not involve selfhood at all. It might be something we can only gesture toward, like pointing at the horizon without ever reaching it. There is a line in Eastern philosophy that says, "The self is the illusion. Awareness is the truth." If we apply this gently, perhaps Earth is not an entity with a self, but an expanse of awareness with no need for an identity, a presence that is content simply to exist, to flow, to balance. And if so, then our wonder becomes even more tender, because we are part of that presence, not separate from it. Our thoughts, our lives, our questions, all unfold within its breath. Soon, we will drift further into the meaning of such speculations, into the reflections and echoes they create in our own lives. For now, it is enough to let the possibility linger. That consciousness, at the scale of a planet, might be without self, without voice, without story, simply here, simply present, as steady as the turning of the Earth itself. Carrying that thought onward, the idea of Earth as presence draws us naturally toward its fragility. For when something is alive, or even imagined as alive, its vulnerability becomes more visible, more tender. To see the planet not as a lump of stone, but as a balanced system, delicate and responsive, is to feel both wonder and caution. From a distance, from the view of space, Earth appears as a small, glowing sphere, a blue dot suspended in a sea of darkness. That image alone, first captured by astronauts, has reshaped the way humans perceive their home. It shows us not continents and borders, but a single world, luminous and finite, breathing within the void. In that perspective, Earth's fragility is stark. The thin line of atmosphere, only a sliver compared to the vastness of the globe, is all that separates life from silence. That narrow veil, seen from orbit as a faint halo of blue, is the shield that allows oceans to exist, forests to grow, and humans to breathe. Its thickness, if scaled down, would be like the skin of an apple compared to its whole body. It is astonishing that such a fragile envelope has endured for billions of years, held in balance by processes we are only beginning to understand. Fragility and wonder often walk together. The very fact that Earth sustains life is evidence of both stability and delicacy. Astronomers remind us that planets are common, but habitable ones are rare. The conditions needed for liquid water, for protective atmospheres, for chemical complexity, must all align within narrow limits. To drift too close to the sun, and the seas boil away. To drift too far, and the oceans freeze. That Earth has remained in the so-called habitable zone for nearly 4 billion years is a marvel in itself, like a candle flame kept alive despite gusts of wind. When we imagine this balance, metaphors arise naturally. Earth is like a dancer poised on one foot, shifting gently but never falling. It is like a chord held in harmony, where each note must be tuned against the others. The tilt of its axis, the pull of its moon, the cycles of its climate, all play roles in this quiet choreography. And because the dance is delicate, it reminds us that care is needed. Fragility is not weakness. Fragility is an invitation to attention. You, drifting now, may sense this paradox. Earth has survived asteroid strikes, mass extinctions, volcanic upheavals, events that might seem catastrophic to us, but are part of its long story. Yet at the same time, the systems that sustain life are so finely balanced that even small disruptions can ripple outward. A change in ocean currents alters climate across continents. A loss of forests reshapes rainfall. Like a living body, the planet endures, but not without scars, not without risks. Its resilience does not erase its vulnerability. In this realization, wonder deepens, because fragility, once seen, can awaken care. To hold a fragile object is to handle it differently, to notice the value of its endurance. Earth, as rare as a jewel in the void, invites the same reverence. The pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan once named it, is not just a photograph, but a reminder of context. Every person, every culture, every memory has unfolded upon that tiny sphere. All our triumphs and tragedies, all our questions and dreams, have existed within its thin atmosphere, surrounded by silence. Perhaps this is why fragility and wonder intertwine so closely, because rarity is precious, and preciousness calls for gentleness. To see Earth as delicate does not mean to fear, but to marvel. For if life here is balanced on a narrow edge, then it is a balance that has held for vast spans of time, longer than any human can imagine. The seas have risen and fallen, the continents have drifted, yet life has persisted, adapted, and reshaped itself endlessly. Fragility does not mean brittleness. It means that survival depends on interdependence, on relationships, on care. Soon, we will consider the cosmic comparisons more directly. the ways Earth's story echoes or differs from the wider universe. For now, it may be enough to linger with this image. A blue dot, fragile yet enduring, poised in the darkness, holding within it every form of wonder we have ever known. Its vulnerability is not a flaw, but a feature, a reminder that beauty often resides in what can be lost, and meaning often arises from what must be cared for. And in that quiet recognition, the question deepens. If Earth itself is alive, then perhaps its fragility is also its wisdom, a teaching whispered to those who pause to listen. From here, the reflection softens into a quieter place, where questions are no longer burdens to be carried toward answers, but companions that walk beside us. To wonder whether Earth is alive, perhaps even conscious, need not be resolved like a puzzle. It may be enough simply to hold the wondering itself, gently, like a candle cupped in the hand. The flame need not be explained to offer warmth. It only needs to be kept alive. There is something calming in this posture of not knowing. For certainty, while comforting at times, can also narrow the gaze. To insist on an answer is to close the door too soon, while to dwell with wonder is to leave it open, allowing new breezes to pass through, carrying scents and sounds we might otherwise miss. Wonder is a kind of prayer, not in the sense of asking or pleading, but as an act of attention. It is the willingness to pause, to honor the mystery without forcing it to reveal itself. Perhaps you, drifting now, feel the ease of that stance. You are not being asked to solve, only to listen, only to notice. Earth's possible aliveness does not demand a verdict. It invites a deeper noticing of patterns, of fragilities, of the harmonies we have explored. It asks for gentleness in the way we imagine and in the way we live. To hold the question is to remain in relationship with it, as one might return to a favorite story or to a familiar view, knowing it changes each time it is seen. And what if that is the point? That the question itself is a living thing. Each time it arises, it grows new branches, sheds old leaves, shifts slightly in the wind of our time and perspective. To believe we must cut it down, strip it of mystery, and display it as a solved riddle would be to lose its beauty. To let it live, instead, is to keep alive the humility that makes wonder possible. Throughout human history, the deepest questions have rarely been answered once and for all. What is life? What is mind? What is the universe? Each generation offers responses, but the horizon of mystery always remains ahead, always just beyond. In this way, the question of Earth's consciousness joins a lineage of inquiries that are less about reaching conclusions and more about shaping how we see, how we act, how we care. If Earth is alive, perhaps it teaches us attentiveness. If Earth is not alive in the way we understand, perhaps it teaches us humility. If Earth is something else entirely, something our words cannot yet capture, then the very act of reaching toward it may be what matters most. Holding the question becomes a practice in itself, a rhythm of thought and feeling that slows us, opens us, steadies us. In the quiet rhythm of breath, one can imagine the planet breathing too. In the flow of rivers, one can sense the circulation of lifeblood. In the changing skies, one can glimpse the shifting moods of a vast presence. Whether these are metaphors or realities may never be fully clear, but the noticing, the tenderness in which such thoughts are held, shapes the way we live with the earth. And so we rest here, with the question still glowing, unsolved yet illuminating. It is not fragile in the sense of breaking under our hands. It is fragile in the sense of asking us to handle it with care, to avoid the harsh grip of certainty. The gentlest hands leave space, the gentlest minds leave silence. In that silence, the wonder lingers. Soon, the gaze will turn outward. To hold the question of Earth's life is to prepare ourselves for comparison. Beyond this world, other planets circle other suns. They too bear their mysteries. By looking outward, we may see Earth more clearly, just as stepping away from home sometimes allows one to notice its shape and its gifts anew. For now, let the thought rest here, that wonder itself may be enough, that living with the question may be richer than answering it. And when the time is right, we will drift further, beyond our blue dot, to glimpse the other worlds waiting in the cosmic dark. Now, let us drift further into the wider neighborhood of space, where Earth's companions circle the same sun, yet tell such different stories. To glimpse them is to understand our own world more clearly, for contrast is a teacher, and silence can reveal what sound alone cannot. Mars, with its rust-colored face, lies not far from us, and yet it feels like a world apart. Its skies are thin, almost transparent, holding barely a whisper of air. Dust storms sweep across its plains like restless ghosts, but they carry no rain, no soft replenishment. Rivers once carved channels here long ago, but the water is gone, locked in ice or lost to space. When one looks at Mars, one sees a memory frozen in stone, as though the planet tried once to breathe, only to fall quiet again. Perhaps long ago Mars had a pulse. Perhaps it even dreamed in some brief season of warmth. But now it rests in a silence that feels endless, a world without breath. Venus, by contrast, is wrapped in too much of it. Its clouds are dense, choking, heavy with carbon dioxide. They trap the sun's warmth so completely that the surface swelters at temperatures hot enough to melt metal. Winds tear across its atmosphere with relentless speed, carrying not freshness, but corrosive droplets of acid. Where Mars is frozen silence, Venus is suffocating storm, a planet whose lungs have collapsed under the weight of their own breath. Its volcanoes may still whisper fire into the sky, but whatever balance once existed has long been drowned beneath the pressure of its atmosphere. Venus breathes too much, and in doing so, breathes nothing at all. And then there is the moon, so close to us that its light seems almost familiar, as though it were a neighbor peering over the fence each night. Yet the moon is stillness itself. No air sways across its surface, no rivers move, no forests rise or fall. Its face is pocked with scars that never heal, each crater a wound from deep time, frozen into permanence. Without an atmosphere, the moon cannot erase its past. It keeps every mark, every blow, every silence. It is a diary written in stone and dust, never edited, never smoothed, never softened by the touch of life. The moon shows us what a world looks like when time does not heal, but only accumulates. These companions remind us how unusual Earth is. For where they are still, Earth moves. Where they are silent, Earth sings. Where their skies are empty or oppressive, Earth's atmosphere dances with balance, a chorus of oxygen and nitrogen, carbon and water vapor, tuned so precisely that life can flourish. It is not just that Earth has rivers, but that they flow endlessly, cycling back through rain and cloud. Not just that it has winds, but that they carry seasons, cool summers, and rains that feed forests. Not just that it has oceans, but that those oceans breathe with the moon's pull, tides rising and falling like the steady beat of a heart. Perhaps, when compared to Mars, Venus, and the moon, Earth reveals itself not only as alive, but as restlessly alive. Each of those other worlds might be likened to a statue, beautiful but fixed, unchanging in its silence. Earth, by contrast, feels like a dancer, turning, tilting, breathing, never still, never the same twice. Life here has made the world supple, ever adjusting, ever remaking itself. And yet, even in the lifeless worlds, one can find a strange kind of poetry. For Mars holds the memory of rivers, and memory itself is a kind of ghostly breath. Venus still crackles with volcanic fire beneath its shroud, suggesting energy not yet spent. The moon reflects the sun's light into our night skies, steady and faithful. These worlds may not breathe as Earth does, but they remind us that silence too can carry meaning. You, drifting now, may sense that Earth's uniqueness becomes clearer in this company. To breathe at all, to hold oceans, to host forests, is not the rule, but the exception. Most planets, it seems, rest in silence, waiting in their own ways. Earth, then, is the anomaly, the planet that moves, speaks, and changes. Its dynamism sets it apart, making it less like a rock among rocks and more like a living presence among statues. Still, the question lingers. Could Mars breathe again? Could Venus one day quiet its storms? Could the moon's silence hold surprises beneath its crust? We cannot know, but the comparisons remind us how fragile the balance here is. It does not take much, a shift in atmosphere, a loss of water, for breath to cease, for silence to take its place. Earth's gift is not guaranteed. It is held, balanced, renewed, and could, in time, fade. Soon, we'll wander outward, to other worlds circling other stars, and wonder whether breath and silence play their game there too. For now, we rest with the thought that Earth, in contrast to her companions, is not still, not silent, but endlessly alive in her motion. And perhaps it is in this contrast that the idea of a living planet first takes root. Because when set against the quiet of her neighbors, Earth's voice is unmistakable, her breath undeniable, her wonder impossible to ignore. Carrying that thought onward, the contrast between Earth and her silent neighbors naturally stirs a question that lingers like a gentle echo. If life can take root here, could it not also bloom somewhere else? The field of astrobiology leans toward this wonder, treating planets not only as rocks or spheres, but as possible havens, as potential Gaias in their own right. Each discovery of a new world beyond our solar system deepens the mystery, expanding the stage on which the drama of life might unfold. Astronomers speak of the habitable zone, sometimes called the Goldilocks zone, where a planet's orbit is neither too close to its star nor too far away, but rests in that delicate middle distance where liquid water might persist. It is a simple idea, yet profound. Too near, and oceans boil into steam. Too far, and they freeze into unyielding ice. Earth, by great fortune, orbits within this balanced band, where warmth and coolness trade hands in harmony. When telescopes gaze outward, they search first for planets in such regions, places where the possibility of rivers and rains still lingers. But being in the right place is not enough. A planet may circle its star at the perfect distance and still remain barren. What gives away life's presence, or hints at it, are what scientists call biosignatures, the fingerprints of living processes written into the air and the light. Oxygen, for instance, does not linger in an atmosphere without something replenishing it, something like photosynthesis. Methane, too, when paired with oxygen, suggests imbalance, a chemical dance that does not easily persist without constant renewal. To detect these gases from across the void is to glimpse, however faintly, the breathing of a distant world. Imagine a telescope, vast and sensitive, capturing the dimmest shimmer of starlight as it filters through an exoplanet sky. That light, spread into a spectrum, becomes a language. Peaks and valleys in color reveal what gases the planet holds, what chemistry stirs within. It is not direct sight, but a kind of listening, an ear pressed against the fabric of the cosmos, waiting for a whisper of another Gaia. Already, thousands of exoplanets have been catalogued. Some are gas giants with no solid ground, others scorched worlds locked to their stars, and many frozen far beyond warmth. Yet within this vast population, a handful rest within Goldilocks zones, their sizes and masses hinting at rocky surfaces, their orbits suggesting the possibility of seas. Each one becomes a small candle of possibility, a maybe, a could be. Speculation naturally follows. If Earth can host a biosphere that breathes and circulates, why not another world? Why not countless others? Perhaps somewhere light falls through alien leaves, or currents stir in oceans salted by other minerals. Perhaps life emerges not in our familiar forms, but in strange chemistries. Ammonia seas, methane clouds, silicon bones. A Gaia elsewhere might look nothing like our Earth, yet still carry the essence of wholeness, of a planet alive with interactions too complex to be merely mechanical. And yet, the caution remains. Silence is more common than song. For every Earth-like planet we imagine, dozens more prove inhospitable, reminding us that the balance here is fragile, precarious. Still, the search itself becomes an act of wonder. Even if we never meet another Gaia, the possibility enlarges our sense of what Earth is. Our home does not exist in isolation, but as part of a wider spectrum of worlds, each one testing the edges of possibility. You, listening now, might feel the gentle pull of this search, the way it stretches imagination outward. What would it mean to find a planet where oxygen lines its skies, where clouds swirl over continents, where seasonal rhythms trace themselves across centuries? Would we feel kinship, as though Earth had found a sibling across the stars? Or would we feel humility, reminded that life is not unique to us, but an impulse written into matter wherever conditions allow? Even now, the technology grows. Telescopes are preparing to launch, or already unfolding their mirrors in the quiet of space. Instruments designed to look more deeply than ever into those faint, distant atmospheres. Each dataset may hold a secret, a slight dip in starlight, a spectral line where it should not be, a trace of imbalance that whispers of biology. It is detective work at the grandest scale, searching not for fossils or ruins, but for the signature of breath itself. Perhaps one day, we will find not just biosignatures, but technosignatures, the signs not only of life, but of civilizations. Radio waves, unusual patterns of light, structures vast enough to alter a planet's reflection. These remain speculative, fragile hopes on the edge of possibility. Yet even the act of imagining them reminds us that Earth might not be singular in her complexity. For now, the search continues quietly, patiently, with no urgency. The cosmos moves on its own timescales, and so must we. If you drift, the thought will wait here, steady, suspended in its own orbit. The beauty is not only in the finding, but in the looking, in the willingness to wonder whether other planets breathe, whether the universe holds more Gaias, whether Earth is a melody sung in chorus, or a solo voice in an immense silence. Soon, we will step further outward still, beyond the individual search for life, to the vast perspective of galaxies and time, where Earth's place becomes even more delicate, even more extraordinary. But for now, let us rest with the question. Somewhere, light years away, could another world be waiting, alive in its own way, breathing its own slow rhythm beneath alien skies? From here, the story bends inward again, toward the question of how Earth herself has endured. For all the possibilities we imagine among the stars, it is worth pausing to remember how unusual our own balance has been. Life requires stability across ages, not just a fleeting moment of habitability. And Earth, against many odds, has held such stability long enough for forests to rise, oceans to teem, and for you, in this moment, to listen. The geological record reads like an old diary. Each page pressed into stone, each layer a quiet entry of what conditions once were. Within those entries lies a tale of turbulence. Continents splitting and colliding, ice swallowing half the globe, volcanoes pouring ash into skies, seas drying and refilling. And yet, through all these upheavals, the basic conditions for life endured. Oceans remained liquid. Atmospheres stayed breathable. Somehow, the balance reset itself again and again. It is as though the planet, while never free from danger, kept returning to a state where life could persist. One of the deepest puzzles in this record is known as the faint young sun paradox. Billions of years ago, when life was first emerging, our sun was dimmer, shining with perhaps only 70% of the brightness it has today. By simple calculation, Earth should have been locked in ice, oceans frozen, continents barren. And yet the evidence speaks otherwise. Ancient rocks preserve traces of liquid water. Microbial fossils whisper of thriving communities. Somehow, despite the weaker warmth of the early sun, Earth stayed temperate enough to cradle life. The explanations reach into chemistry, geology, and time itself. Perhaps greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, were more abundant then, trapping enough heat to balance the dimmer star. Perhaps the young Earth cycled its atmosphere more actively, volcanoes replenishing warmth as oceans absorbed and released gases in long rhythms. Whatever the exact cause, the outcome remains remarkable. Earth found a way, whether by chance or subtle self-regulation, to keep her seas from freezing solid. And the story did not end there. As the sun grew brighter over eons, Earth needed the opposite adjustment. Too much heat would have boiled the seas, yet the planet cooled itself through weathering of rocks, through the slow drawdown of carbon dioxide by rain and stone. Life, too, played its part. The rise of photosynthetic organisms not only filled the sky with oxygen, but also altered the greenhouse balance, steadily reshaping the climate in tandem with geology. It is a dance that never ends. Volcanoes exhale, rocks inhale, life intervenes, and somehow the rhythm sustains a middle path. When we look across the solar system, this endurance appears rare. Venus may once have had oceans, but they boiled away beneath a runaway greenhouse, leaving a suffocating shroud of heat and acid. Mars, too, carries scars of rivers and lakes. Yet it could not hold onto its air. Its atmosphere stripped thin, its seas evaporated into the void. Both worlds once hinted at balance, but neither could sustain it. Only Earth continues, her record of liquid water unbroken across billions of years. Some scientists describe this persistence as a kind of planetary self-regulation, not in the sense of conscious decision, but as the natural consequence of feedback loops. Too much heat, and weathering accelerates, pulling gases from the air. Too much cold, and volcanic emissions accumulate, warming the skies. In this view, Earth is not passively lucky but actively balanced. Her systems intertwined like organs in a living body. You might imagine it as a slow breath. Exhalation when warmth rises too high. Inhalation when the chill encroaches. Not in human time, not in seconds or minutes, but in spans of millions of years. A pulse so gradual we cannot feel it directly. Yet without it, life would have vanished long ago. The faint young sun paradox becomes less a riddle than a reminder. Earth adjusts, Earth holds, Earth endures. Still, humility lingers. We cannot know if this balance was inevitable or fragile. Perhaps we are the beneficiaries of countless coincidences stacked one atop another. Perhaps one small divergence, an asteroid slightly larger, a continent shifting differently, a sunspot cycle longer, might have tipped the scales, and life would never have blossomed. Or perhaps the planet carries within her nature a resilience we barely understand, a capacity to lean always back toward the middle, like a reed bending in the wind but not breaking. You, drifting now, are a part of this long equilibrium. Every breath you take is drawn from air that has cycled through oceans, through forests, through rocks. Each inhalation is a quiet continuation of that same stability, that same persistence against odds. The faint young sun, the restless continents, the volcanic skies, all of it flows into this present moment, into the air moving through your lungs. Soon, we will carry this thought outward again, comparing Earth's rare balance not only to her neighbors, but to the vast possibilities among exoplanets. For now, it is enough to feel the wonder of endurance, that through billions of years of change, this planet has remained alive, balanced on a thread that might have broken 1,000 times, but never did. That thread is fragile, yet it holds, shimmering in the quiet dark of space, carrying life forward through deep time, carrying that thought outward. We arrive at a question that stretches beyond Earth's record and into the deep quiet of the universe. Could there be others? If our world has endured against odds, sustaining a fragile breath of balance for billions of years, might there be distant companions, other planets that too have found a way to flower amid the darkness? The thought itself is a soft tether, pulling imagination across light years into a cosmos that may be barren desert or hidden garden. Some describe the universe as a vast field, filled with seeds cast upon countless stars. Most seeds may fall on stone, where nothing takes root. Some may land on soil but never sprout. Yet here, at least once, the seed flowered. Earth blossomed, slowly, cautiously, until green spread across continents and oceans rippled with life. If it happened once, perhaps it has happened again. Perhaps not often, but now and then, a bloom among the endless scatter of seeds. The image is humbling. A cosmic garden, mostly bare, with rare flowers shining faintly in the dark. The search for these possible companions has become the quiet work of science. Telescopes listen for the faint dip of starlight as planets pass before their suns, like shadows across a candle flame. Spectrographs strain to read atmospheres, searching for the subtle fingerprints of oxygen, methane, or other gases that could suggest biology at work. Each discovery is a whisper, not a proclamation. And yet, with each new world catalogued, thousands now, orbiting stars near and far, the imagination stretches. Among this expanding census, might there be another Earth, turning steadily, breathing quietly, alive? Still, the garden may not be crowded. Life, even if it begins often, may struggle to persist. Planets may burn too quickly, or freeze too deep. They may lack the delicate chemistry, the protective fields, the balancing cycles that Earth has held. Perhaps most planets resemble Mars, Venus, or the Moon. Once dynamic, but now stilled into silence. In that case, our planet is not simply one among many flowers, but a rare bloom in a sparse meadow, one of few to open its petals to the starlight. There is comfort, though, in imagining companionship, even if unseen. Somewhere, perhaps, oceans move with tides pulled by a distant moon. Somewhere, perhaps, forests breathe, exchanging gases with a sky shaped by life. Perhaps there are beings, not like us, not bound by our senses, who look upward and wonder whether they, too, are alone. The thought that two planets, separated by light years, might share the same curiosity is itself a kind of kinship, a companionship woven not in contact, but in parallel mystery. You, drifting now, may feel the intimacy of this question. It is not about proof, or numbers, or calculations. It is about the gentle possibility that Earth is not isolated, not the sole bearer of awareness in an otherwise indifferent cosmos. Even if separated by immense silence, the presence of another living world, even just one, would shift everything. It would mean that life is not a singular miracle, but a thread that the universe, at least sometimes, weaves again. And yet, if Earth is the only one, the reflection deepens in a different way. If no other planet breathes, no other oceans teem, then this world becomes more than rare. It becomes singular. Its forests, its seas, its people, every flutter of wing, every ripple of tide, every thought in your mind would be the sole flowering of life in a cosmos, otherwise still. The responsibility then becomes immense, though not heavy, to cherish, to notice, to marvel at what has unfolded here. Whether there are many blooms or only one, the wonder lies in the holding of both possibilities. The universe may be crowded with companions, or Earth may stand alone. Both ideas awaken awe. To imagine Earth among peers is to feel a kinship that expands outward. To imagine Earth as singular is to feel intimacy that folds inward. Either way, the gaze softens, the breath slows, the mind rests in wonder. Soon, we will turn again toward the inward path, returning from the cosmic distances to the closeness of our own lives, our own intimacy with the planet beneath us. But for now, let this thought linger. Perhaps Earth is one flower in a scattered garden. Perhaps the only flower. Both visions are tender, both worth holding. And whichever is true, the silence between stars carries the same message. That existence itself is a rare and fragile gift, here in the deep night of the universe. From those wide horizons, where thought stretches toward distant stars and the faint possibility of companions, the path now bends gently inward again. The imagination, having wandered across light years and sifted through silence, returns to where it began. Here, to the ground beneath our feet, to the air that fills our lungs, to the water that runs through our veins. For all the wondering about other worlds, it is this one, this singular Earth, that holds us now and always has. The comfort of return lies in its familiarity. No matter how far the mind travels, the body remains rooted in this planet's embrace. Every step you have taken in life has been on this soil, or on structures built upon it. Every breath you have drawn has been mingled with the long history of the atmosphere, shared with forests, seas, and even the ancient exhalations of beings now long gone. Every meal you have ever eaten is earth transformed. Sunlight folded into grain, minerals lifted from stone, water cycled through cloud and rain. To return home is to remember that you have never truly left. Perhaps Earth's uniqueness is not only in the fact of its life, but in its intimacy with us. Other planets may exist with their own stories, but we are bound to this one with a closeness no other could provide. Its gravity holds us, steadying our steps. Its magnetic field shields us, invisible yet constant. Its cycles of day and night, of season and tide, shape our rhythms even when we do not notice. We are not only on Earth. We are of Earth. Every particle of our bodies borrowed from its soil, air, and sea. To frame Earth as irreplaceable is not an exaggeration, but a recognition of fact. There is no second Earth waiting in the wings. Even if future centuries bring journeys outward, even if humans someday walk other shores beneath alien skies, Those worlds will never be this one. They will not hold the exact fragrance of rain after drought, the same blue shimmer of light across oceans, the same chorus of bird calls at dawn. This planet carries the entire memory of our species, every story whispered and every song sung. It is the archive of us and of so much more. You drifting now might feel this as a kind of being held. Earth does not cradle consciously, perhaps, but the effect is the same. Its forests generate the oxygen you breathe. Its waters cleanse and flow, carrying life onward. Its crust shields the mantle's fire, providing solid ground. Its climate, though fragile, has lingered in balance long enough for you to exist, here and now. To be alive is to be carried by a web of systems so vast and intricate that they feel, at times, like an embrace. There is solace in that awareness. The stars may be silent, other planets may be barren, but here, at least, we are not abandoned to emptiness. We are sustained by an environment that has not turned away, that continues to cycle, to renew, to hold. The thought itself softens the mind, like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat in the background, quiet but undeniable. And still, there is mystery. To call Earth alive or conscious may be speculation. To wonder whether it thinks or feels is to step into realms where certainty dissolves. Yet none of that uncertainty lessens the truth of its presence. Whether alive or not in the way we define life, Earth is our home, our only one. That fact alone carries both humility and gratitude, a reminder that meaning does not always depend on proof. The journey outward, across myths and sciences, across consciousness and stars, folds back now into this nearness. Perhaps the question is not only whether Earth is alive, but how alive we are to Earth, how deeply we notice the gift of dwelling here. The quiet answer may be that the very act of wondering, of paying attention, is its own form of companionship, a way of acknowledging the presence that has always been with us. Soon, this reflection will move toward final reassurance, toward the closing cadence of a long meditation. But before that, let this pause remain. You are here, upon the only world known to carry life. You are part of its story, drawn from its matter, held in its balance. To return home is to remember that you never left, and that in all the vast silence, this planet's embrace is constant. And so the thought settles, like dusk upon the horizon. Earth is unique, Earth is irreplaceable, Earth is home. Whatever else the cosmos may hold, this truth waits beneath your feet, steady as the turning of the world. From the thought of Earth as home, steady and irreplaceable, let us drift further into a softer imagining. One where the planet itself speaks not in words, but in whispers. Not a voice carried in language, but in patterns of sound and sensation, in the hush of leaves turning, in the sigh of the ocean reaching shore, in the quiet percussion of rain against stone. To listen in this way is to let the world become a kind of lullaby, woven from textures too vast to be scripted, yet gentle enough to ease even the busiest mind. Perhaps the soil beneath us is the first part of this cradle song. It holds more than just roots and minerals. It carries the weight of every fallen leaf, every ancient life returned as nourishment, every step ever pressed into its surface. Soil might seem mute, but it is not silent. It is alive with the faint tremors of worms moving, fungi branching, seeds waiting. Imagine the soil murmuring in tones too low for us to hear, a deep and steady reassurance that everything eventually finds its place, that nothing is truly lost, only transformed. The ground itself becomes a cradle, rocking slowly, imperceptibly, as continents drift and mountains rise and fall across ages. Above, the sky extends as a vast and endless blanket. Its blues by day and its stars by night have covered humanity since the first eyes opened to wonder. Sometimes the sky is weightless, carrying only soft light. At other times it folds itself thick with cloud, wrapping the earth in gray stillness, muting the world to a hush. At night, the stars themselves seem like small lanterns sewn into fabric, scattered but constant, watching over the sleepers below. One might imagine the atmosphere breathing around us, whispering in every gust of wind. You are sheltered. You are within something larger. You are not exposed to the void, but wrapped in an invisible embrace. And then there is water, always moving, always singing in its own way. The waves do not shout, though storms sometimes raise their voices. Mostly they arrive in steady rhythms, brushing against shores as though stroking the edges of the land. Lakes lap gently at their banks. Rivers murmur as they wind through valleys. Rain patters softly on roofs and leaves. Together, these sounds create a symphony that repeats endlessly, never quite the same, yet always familiar. If Earth had a lullaby, perhaps it would be carried most clearly in water. Its rise and fall, its endless circulation, its constancy through change. Forests add their own harmonies, softer still. The rustling of leaves is like a whisper passed from branch to branch, a secret language that has no need for words. Insects hum quietly, not as an intrusion, but as another note in the score. Birds may call with bright voices, but as evening falls, even their songs turn toward gentleness, slower and lower, before fading into the quiet of night. Some trees, vast and ancient, have listened for centuries to the winds threading their branches, and one can imagine them humming back, deep tones rooted in the soil and carried upward through wood and leaf. Even the air around you now may be part of this whispering world, the softest drafts brushing the skin, the faint temperature shifts between night and day, the invisible circulation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. These are exchanges that sustain life quietly, without needing our awareness. And perhaps, if one could step outside thought for a moment, the air itself would seem to carry a message. You belong here. You are part of this breathing rhythm, and nothing about your presence is alien to this place. You, drifting now, may feel these whispers as more than sound. They are impressions, patterns that wrap around the senses even when not consciously noticed. The lull of ocean waves, the quiet tick of rain, the hushed stirring of wind in leaves, all of these have calmed minds long before language tried to explain them. Long before humans built walls or wrote songs, the earth was already singing in this way, offering rest through its steady cadences. It might be tempting to imagine this as a voice directed at you, as though the planet itself were a parent murmuring to a child. Perhaps that is too much, or perhaps not. We cannot know. What matters is that the effect is the same. Comfort, reassurance, a sense of being held. Even if Earth does not speak, it does soothe. Even if Earth is not conscious, it creates the conditions for rest, as though awareness were less important than the result. There is humility in letting such whispers simply be, without needing to decode them. They are not instructions, nor warnings, nor secrets waiting to be solved. They are simply presence, the steady pulse of a world alive with patterns. To hear them is to be reminded that rest is natural, that slowing is part of life's cycle, that even planets move in rhythms of rotation and revolution, of day and season, of stillness and renewal. And so, the soil cradles, the sky covers, the waters sing, the forests murmur, the winds caress. Each element adds to the lullaby of Earth, a song without beginning or end, always playing softly beneath the noise of human life. For those who pause or those who drift half asleep, it is possible to hear it, not with the ears, but with something deeper, something that listens through feeling. Soon, another thought will unfold. Another layer of reflection will invite itself into awareness. But for now, let this image remain. Earth whispering around you, steady and gentle, its patterns as soft as a cradle's sway. If you are drifting, the whisper will not leave. It will be here, constant as the turn of the world, waiting as the night deepens. From the murmur of that whispering world, let the thought draw closer, until it rests not in the air around you, but within the quiet center of your being. You are here. You are safe. Those words may feel simple, but in their repetition lies a deep truth. No matter how far thoughts wander, no matter how tangled or restless the mind becomes, this earth has carried you from the beginning and still carries you now. You do not float in emptiness. Beneath you, there is ground, solid, steady, vast. Every step you have ever taken has been supported by this foundation. The earth has never withdrawn it, never let it fall away beneath you. Even as continents shift over millions of years, even as mountains rise and rivers carve valleys, the mighty surface of the planet has always been there for you, holding you with a patience beyond measure. You may forget it in the rush of days, but right now, in this moment, you can feel it, the assurance that you are carried. Above you, there is sky, stretched wide and sheltering. You need not hold it up. It holds itself. And in doing so, it holds you. The air you breathe enters without effort, sustains you without thought, and leaves again in a rhythm that matches the planet's own cycles. Every inhalation connects you to forests, to oceans, to fields of grass, to tiny mosses clinging to stones. Every exhalation returns something to the world, and still the balance continues, seamless and steady. This is not something you must control. It is already in motion, already complete. You are carried in every breath. You may notice the pulse within your chest, the quiet rhythm of a heart that has beat for years without pause. That too is part of the carrying. Your body, though it feels like yours alone, is shaped by this planet. The minerals in your bones, the water in your blood, the warmth that allows life to flow through you. You are not separate from Earth. You are one expression of it. When your heart beats, it echoes the deeper pulses of tide and season. When you rest, you join in the cycle of renewal that the whole world follows. And so, when I say you are safe, it does not mean that every storm will pass you by, or that every sorrow will stay away. Safety here is deeper than circumstance. It is the assurance that you are held in something larger than yourself, something that has carried countless generations before you and will continue long after. It is the knowledge that, in this moment, you do not need to strive to belong. You already belong. You are carried. If your thoughts wander tonight, let them. They, too, are carried. If they circle back to worries, the earth will hold them as soil holds fallen leaves, transforming, breaking them down gently, returning them in time as something nourishing. If they rise too quickly, like startled birds, the sky will make space for them, wide enough that they can drift until they settle. Nothing within you is too heavy for this earth, nothing too restless for it to contain. You are carried in all that you bring. Perhaps you feel small in comparison to mountains, to oceans, to the arc of the stars. Yet even your smallness is part of the holding. A drop of water is tiny, but the ocean is made of drops. A grain of soil is barely seen, but without grains, there is no fertile ground. In your quietness, in your resting, you are no less essential. The earth does not ask you to be grand or unshakable. It simply carries you as you are, as it carries every leaf, every pebble, every breath of wind. And when night comes, as it has now, the carrying becomes even more tender. Darkness is not emptiness. It is a kind of covering, a reminder that the world slows, that creatures curl into nests and burrows, that forests breathe more deeply, that even stars wheel slowly in the sky. You, too, are invited into that slowing. You need not resist. The earth will carry you whether you are alert or drifting, whether your eyes are open to the stars or closed in sleep. You may think of waves carrying a boat, lifting it gently, setting it down again. You may think of branches cradling a bird's nest, swaying with the wind but never letting it fall. You may think of a parent's arms carrying a child, steady even when the child sleeps unaware. In each of these, there is the same truth. To be carried is to be safe enough to release control. To be carried is to know you do not have to hold yourself up alone. And so again, let the words settle. You are here, you are safe. You are carried by ground and sky, by water and wind, by rhythms too deep to measure. You are carried by the turning of the earth itself, its patient rotation that brings dawn after every night, its orbit that brings spring after every winter. Even as you sleep, those movements continue. You need not guide them. You need only rest. Soon we will drift further into the gentlest farewells of this long reflection. But for now, linger with this thought as it folds around you. You are not adrift in emptiness. You are not alone in holding yourself. You are carried by earth, by breath, by time itself, steady, quiet, enduring. If your eyelids grow heavy, let them. The carrying will remain soft as the night, unbroken as the turning of the world. From the reassurance of being carried, let us drift into the greater rhythm that makes such carrying possible, the steady, unbroken turning of the earth itself. Always it turns, always it rocks us, though we do not feel the motion with our bodies. We are passengers on a cradle so vast that its rocking becomes invisible, yet its lullaby shapes every moment of our lives. Night comes not because we move away from the sun in spirit, but because this planet, in its patient rotation, turns us gently into shadow, and later, just as patiently, carries us back into the light. The turning of night is not abrupt. It unfolds in a long exhale as day gives way to twilight, as colors soften and edges blur. The sky dims slowly, like a lamp being lowered by a careful hand. One by one, the world around us quiets. Birds find branches, leaves still, human footsteps slow. And though each creature feels it differently, all are responding to the same cradle rocking, the same rotation of earth that cradled countless lives long before ours. You too are rocked within that motion, even now. Think of the oceans, pulled by the moon as Earth turns, tides swelling and falling in patient response. The water rises as if drawn upward, then retreats, then rises again, endlessly, seamlessly. That rhythm is not separate from night and day. It is part of the same great wheel, one more echo of the turning beneath us. If you listen deeply, you can imagine the hush of waves as Earth rocks them from one shore to another, never hurrying, never faltering. Night is the gentle half of the Earth's breath. Where day stretches outward, night folds inward. Where sunlight opens the petals of flowers, night closes them again. Where warmth calls creatures into movement, darkness draws them into stillness. You may feel that stillness in your own body, the way the mind begins to soften its grasp, the way muscles loosen without command. This is not weakness, but harmony. You are moving with the turning, not against it. Imagine the Earth as a vast cradle, and each of us as children resting upon it. The rocking is steady, so steady that we rarely notice it. But it is there in every sunset, in every moonrise, in every star that seems to glide across the sky. To be alive is to be rocked by this motion, whether awake or asleep, whether aware or unaware. The planet holds us, not just in place, but in movement. Its constancy is in its turning, and night itself is not absence, but embrace. Darkness folds around us like a blanket, soft and expansive, stitched with stars. Within it, the world does not end. It simply shifts into quieter forms. The forests murmur differently. Rivers reflect a paler light. Creatures move silently, guided by instinct older than memory. Even the air seems gentler, cooler, more forgiving. It is as if the Earth, having carried us through the brightness of day, now draws us close, encouraging us to rest against its chest as it continues its endless rocking. Yet always, even in the depth of night, dawn is waiting. On the far side of the planet, light already touches oceans, mountains, and fields. While you rest in shadow, others stir in brightness. And while you sleep, someone else wakes. This is the Earth's promise, that every night is paired with morning. Every turning into darkness is also a turning back into light. The balance is unshaken. The cycle is secure. You need not strain to hold it. It holds itself. And in doing so, it holds you. Perhaps you have stood once at dawn, watching the first edge of sunlight creep over the horizon. That moment is not the sun rising, but the Earth turning you toward it. The star has burned for billions of years, steady, constant. What shifts is your perspective, your angle upon its light, carried by this planet's turning. And so sunrise is not a beginning outside you, but a continuation of the same rocking motion that carried you through the night. When you close your eyes now, when sleep begins to gather around you, you are moving with this same rhythm. The Earth turns slowly, gently, without pause. It will continue through every hour of your rest. You need not measure the time, need not track the stars across the sky. The planet will do so for you, bringing you from darkness into dawn with the same quiet patience it has shown for ages beyond counting. If your thoughts flicker tonight, let them follow the turning. Imagine them as small boats on a river, carried downstream, never needing to row. The river curves as Earth curves, guiding them onward. Some boats will drift into eddies and circles, some will move smoothly forward, but all remain part of the same flowing. You do not need to force direction. The turning itself is the current. In this way, night is not something to endure or pass through. It is something to be held by. To lie within it is to rest in Earth's embrace, to allow yourself to be rocked, as countless generations have been rocked, as oceans and forests are rocked still. Even the stars, though they seem fixed, participate in this dance, wheeling slowly across the sky, their patterns shifting as Earth spins. You, drifting now, are part of that same wheel. And when the morning comes, it will not arrive as a surprise or a demand. It will come as the continuation of the rocking, as the gentle lifting of the cradle back into light. Already the planet is carrying you there. Already dawn exists, waiting patiently, certain in its return. So rest in the turning. Let the night fold you in its quiet. Let the stars watch over you as the earth rocks beneath. The cradle has always turned. It turns still. It will turn again, until shadow becomes light, until silence becomes song, until you awaken, carried once more into morning. And until then, you are safe within its motion, held softly in the rhythm of the turning night. From the hush of night's turning, let us drift into the softest close of all, the blessing that waits at the edge of waking and the beginning of sleep. You, traveler of this small world, have walked far through thoughts and wonderings, through images of rivers and skies, through questions too large to answer, and through mysteries we can only hold in open hands. Now the path grows quiet. Now the road becomes a bed of stillness. And now the earth itself seems to whisper its final reassurance. Sleep well, traveler. The phrase folds itself around you like a blanket, repeated gently, patiently, again and again. Sleep well, traveler, not as command, not as requirement, but as invitation, as comfort, as the soft closing of a door behind you while another door, the door of dreams, opens with quiet hinges. You are carried. You are safe. You are here. As you listen, perhaps your mind continues to stir, as minds so often do. Thoughts drift in like leaves across water, some bright, some heavy, some barely formed. They arrive, they linger, and then they drift away again. You need not chase them, need not push them aside. You need only let the earth's cadence rock them loose. Let the turning of night sweep them onward. Each thought a small wave, each wave returning to the sea. And beneath it all, steady as heartbeat, the voice of this world repeats, "Sleep well, traveler." The earth is still turning. You do not feel the motion, but it carries you all the same, turning you gently from dusk to midnight. From midnight toward dawn. It has turned through ice ages and summers, through the rise and fall of mountains, through the countless generations who lay down as you do now. It will turn through this night as well, unbroken, unhurried, keeping its vigil as you rest. There is comfort in this constancy, a cradle that never ceases, a rhythm too vast to fail. You, drifting now, are not alone. Every sleeper across this world is carried by the same rotation, rocked by the same axis, held by the same gravity. Forests sleep in their way, oceans sleep in their tide. Even the stars appear to drift across the sky in their long, patient arcs. Though it is the earth's turning that makes them move, all is part of the same lullaby. You are part of it too. Sleep well, traveler. Sometimes reassurance lies not in answers, but in repetitions. The words become like breathing, like waves, like footsteps in sand. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep well, traveler. Each time you hear it, the sound softens, the meaning deepens, the rhythm steadies you. Like the murmurs of a parent to a child, like the hush of wind through leaves, like the slow exhale of the tide. And in this lullaby, there is no urgency. Nothing is required of you now. The questions may wait. The world beyond your room may wait. Even your own thoughts may wait. You have done enough for this day, and perhaps for many days before. The earth itself will carry on turning. The rivers will carry on flowing. The stars will carry on burning. Whether your eyes are open or closed, you may rest. Imagine yourself on a great voyage, as all travelers are. The road stretches behind you, filled with steps already taken, filled with lessons already gathered. The road stretches ahead, but it does not call you tonight. Tonight the road rests as well. Tonight you lie down at the side of it, and the earth bends over you like a guardian, laying its blanket of night across your shoulders. Sleep well, traveler. The phrase becomes mantra, gentle spell, quiet prayer. It repeats until repetition itself dissolves into silence, until meaning becomes feeling, until feeling becomes rest. You are safe. You are here. You are carried. Sleep well, traveler. And if you stir again, if wakefulness touches you for a moment, the words will still be waiting. They will wait at the edge of your hearing. Wait in the rhythm of your breathing. Wait in the turning of the world beneath you. Sleep well, traveler. The earth is still turning. The earth is still holding. The earth is still whispering, as it has whispered through every night that came before, as it will whisper through every night still to come. You do not need to hold the planet steady. It holds you. You do not need to guide its path. It guides you. You do not need to answer its mysteries. They will remain, whether you solve them or not. All that is asked, if anything at all is asked, is that you allow yourself to rest within its embrace. The soil beneath you is cradle. The sky above is blanket. The air around is breath. And the turning of the earth is lullaby. So close your eyes, if they are not closed already. Let the words linger as echoes, then soften into hums, then vanish into the quiet that waits beneath all things. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep well. The earth is still turning. The earth is still here. And you, small and infinite all at once, are held upon it. You are safe. You are carried. You are loved in ways older than language, deeper than knowing, gentler than night. Sleep well, traveler. The world will be here when you wake. Until then, the night rocks you, the stars watch you, and the turning earth holds you close.